IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. That's Trevor Trowbridge. I'm Brian Driscoll, and I'm pretty fired up today, so I'm ready to dive right into our topics today. We have got some great topics for y'all today. We're going to talk, our show was originally just going to be focusing on the sophomore class. We told y'all that we had sort of a special show just for the sophomore class. That's why we kept leaving them out of all these different topics, with the exception of Leonard Moore, because he was too good to leave out of the star player category. Not good enough to leave off of the key returning players by ESPN, but, we had to talk about him in the star portion of our show. But we're going to talk a lot about the sophomore class and how important it is to this season, to the point where I would say this team can't reach their full potential if this class doesn't have a big year. And we'll dive into the reasons for that. And then we'll talk about specific players and kind of our expectations for those guys this season and have some fun with that. But that was originally going to be our entire topic, and we're still going to obviously talk about that. We're not taking anything away from that conversation. But yesterday, news broke that USC might be leaving the Notre Dame rivalry. Have you heard this, Trevor? Did you know that this was a thing? Like, have you heard this? Like, wow, I had no idea that USC was looking to duck out of this rivalry, and I don't understand why the national media is all of a sudden talking about this topic. And so it was just, that kind of annoyed me. And, Pat Forty wrote an article about it yesterday, and it was a fair article, and I had no problem with what Pat Forty wrote. I was more annoyed by all the aggregation of that article that was acting like this was some new thing that Pat Forty broke, and there was this new, like, oh my gosh, did you guys know this was happening? Like, guys, we've been talking about this for like a year. But whatever. But he wrote an article today that I thought was absolutely awesome and just brilliant. Like, this is vintage Pat Forty today. And it kind of got me fired up about this topic. And then everybody keeps talking about it. Notre Dame fans are talking about it. And I'm like, man, there's just not enough people listen to our show, because if you did, you would know that this topic has been brought up like a lot of different times. But I did want to talk about it today because I look, we assume certain things are going to go a certain direction, and then events happen that tend to maybe shift the direction of certain things, whether it's sporting events or that are short term, like, hey, this was going in this team's direction, and all of a sudden this thing happens. And I always think of like the Duke Notre Dame game in 2007 when Notre Dame jumps up to a 14-0 lead, and then boom, Duke returns a kickoff back, and it just takes away all that momentum, and that game changed completely after that. But it could also be like longer term, like the trajectory of a thing is going for several years, and then this event happens and it turns things in a different direction, positively or negatively. Like, those things happen all the time. And we're going down this path in college football where we're kind of headed towards a cliff, and nobody seems to know or care that we're heading over this cliff. And it's frustrating and it's maddening. And there's a lot of people, we talk about it all the time. I'm starting to hear some more national people talking about it more and more, but not enough. And so we're starting to see a little bit of a shift, but not enough of a shift. But that's kind of starting to change a little bit. But then there's this USC-Notre Dame thing. And it was one of those things where it's like, look, this just is what it is. And Notre Dame fans don't like it. Doesn't seem like most USC fans are okay with it. That's the impression I get from wrongly only looking at social media. But when I look at this, it's another symbol of the direction we're going in college football. And it frustrated me that nobody was talking about that. Well, Pat Forty talked about that, and he talked about it, and he talked about it, and he basically he barbecued USC in his article today. And so I want to talk about that article. I want to talk about how necessary this article was, not just to Notre Dame, USC. I mean, he barbecued USC quite a bit in that show today. He put some sauce on it. It's like, let's get this little extra done. My wife likes it well done, so we're going to really cook this thing today. That's what he did to USC. But there's a lot of merit to it. But he made it even bigger picture in that this is a symbol of not just Notre Dame, USC. It's not just about that. This is a symbol of the direction we're going in college football, and it ain't right. And so you're starting to see I saw Scott Wolf, who covers USC, talk about basically like, look, why are you allowing Lincoln Riley, who's kind of I don't know that he used the word coward. I'm going to actually find the thing that he said, but he took a little bit of a shot at him. And my hope is that we're starting to see hopefully more and more people start to kind of push back on this, because I've said all along, and Trev, I've said this for months. You've agreed with me. You've said it for months. The only way this changes is if the money people at USC say, the boosters at USC say, we're not getting rid of this rivalry. And so I want to kind of discuss this a little bit, Trev, but the part of, and I'll read several quotes that Pat Forty had about this topic, but the big takeaway for me, the thing that I was really most thankful for that he said, is he talked about how this is bigger than just basically Notre Dame. And I'm paraphrasing what he said. This is bigger than Notre Dame and USC. And this is a comment he made at the very end of his article. And I'll read other quotes that he had as well. But he said, throwing all that away. This is, I'll give you the lead up. He says, no two programs, you talk about how much history Notre Dame and USC have. No two programs that play each other annually have more than their combined 16 national championships since the AP poll became the recognized standard in 1936. Or their combined 15 Heisman Trophy winners. Not Ohio State, Michigan, not Oklahoma, Texas, not Auburn, Alabama. Throwing all that away for an easier schedule would be a crime against football. Even altering the dates and locations to play on Labor Day weekend, maybe in Las Vegas or Arlington or Atlanta, would be an abdication of responsibility to the rivalry. Even in these tumultuous times, not everything should be disposable in college sports. Any protected list of tradition should very much include USC and Notre Dame. So he takes a shot at USC there, but he also talks about there and in other areas where, hey, guys, do you see what we're doing to this sport? Do you guys have any clue at all why football is so popular, why college football is so popular? Because for all the changes in the NFL that we've seen in recent years that I don't particularly care for, that have caused me to stop watching, it's still a super popular sport because you know what you can still expect to see every year? The Broncos and Chiefs play twice. The Broncos and Raiders play twice. The Bengals and Browns are going to play twice. The Browns and Steelers are going to play twice. The Packers and Bears are going to play twice. The Packers and Vikings are going to play twice. The Cowboys and the Commanders are going to play twice. The Giants and the Cowboys are going to play twice. That hasn't gone away because they understand the rivalries, the passion behind the rivalries is ultimately what fuels this sport. College football is losing that in a big way, or they're trying to kill it. And I think this was Pat Forty's attempt to not only push back against the specifics of the Notre Dame USC, but saying very clearly, like, this speaks to an even broader issue. And he even talked about even more in the article he wrote yesterday. But I thought that part was the one that, we're going to hammer USC and we're going to crush USC a little bit. But that takeaway is vitally important because this is bigger than Notre Dame and USC, Trevor.
Yeah, Brian, I couldn't agree more. Look, I am a proponent of change. I think change is good if you don't sacrifice what made the foundation so good in the first place. And that's what sets college sports aside. That's why I loved it. I grew up watching both NFL and college. And my takeaway, I loved college so much more at the end for so many different reasons. We talk a lot on the show about the different changes and how different the transfer portal is and how different NIL is from what it was before. And I mean, I in a done the correct way, I think things are positive. I think those are good takeaways, but there is no benefit to getting rid of rivalry games in college because that's what makes it college. I mean, yeah, sure, you have different fan bases, but I mean, you go across the country, like, students, not even athletes, students who go to these opposing schools don't like said other school because they know it, like they live it, they breathe it every day. And I know there's some other fan bases of, from different teams that belong to different teams that look at this and say, well, at least it's not the game, at least it's not the Iron Bowl, at least it's not the, at least it's not the Red River. But this is a major step towards those things going away so people can make more money. Just USC Notre Dame is the first big potential domino to fall in that. And so big picture, I loved what Pat said and what he wrote about because to me, it's people are wanting to sacrifice what made college football so great just to make a little extra cash. And that's really, really disheartening. Really disheartening.
There's some funny comments that he made in this, but he talked about how the USC's pointing to, hey, we're in the Big Ten now, and it's created a lot of travel, and it's tougher to do this and to do that, and we play this really hard Big Ten schedule, which is like nonsense. But he made a comment. It's just I thought was funny. He goes, "Lo and behold, the travel can be a bit onerous going from Los Angeles to Michigan, Minnesota, and Maryland in a 5-week span. With the odd year games having been played in October in South Bend since 1961, those long distance trips can add up. Who could have known this would be a side effect of leaving the Pac-12 to link arms with Rutgers, Maryland, Penn State, and a bunch of Midwestern schools?" Like the shade being thrown there. You guys brought this on yourselves. You made this decision. You're like the way that there's nothing I despise more than people that play the victim card for their own choices. You know, like, I can't believe you're doing this to me. Well, why would that not happen to you? You did this. You break the law, you go to jail. This ain't that hard. You know what I mean? It's not like you were just sitting there watching, TV and then just somebody just breaks in your house and takes you. I mean, don't think that happens very often. You know what I mean? And it's just this whining, like James Franklin whining about the airport and wherever they fly out of for Penn State games. And I'm like, you guys do know you voted on this, right? Like they act like, hey, man, like USC and then these, the Big Ten schools act like USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, just kind of like, like they're a barbaric tribe back in the Roman times that are just creeping up on Roman land and forcing themselves upon the Roman people or something like that. Like, like this isn't some tribe trying to break into your league. You invited them in. You brought them in. And here's the thing, all you schools crying about this, you had a vote. You voted yes. It's also not like the president of the Big Ten was like, hey, now, we're going to thrust these 4 schools upon you, and there's nothing you can do about it. They voted. I believe they voted unanimously to bring these schools in. And it's not like USC was just hanging out, living the Pac-12 life. They're on the beach. They're chilling. They just got done surfing, great early morning surf. And the Big Ten came and threw hoods over their heads and put them in the van and then drove down to, Pasadena, and the Bruins are practicing it, in the Rose Bowl and just hanging out. And they go in there and they put a hood over their head and they go up to Eugene and they kidnapped them in the van and took them to the Big Ten and said, "Hi, you're in the Big Ten now." No, they asked to be in. So when you make a choice like this to say, hey, listen, we were in this league since like 1905 or something crazy like that. We understand that, but we can go get some more money over here because that's all that matters. Then I don't want to hear you crying about the travel on your schedule. And I love the fact that Pat Forty threw shade at them for that. Like, who knew that this was going to be a side effect of you guys joining the Big Ten and having to travel across the country and playing Piscataway and all these other places? I had no idea. We had no idea. We thought we were going to see what happened was we thought that we were going to be able to teleport from here to there and it would make travel a lot easier. But unfortunately, the technology has not advanced to the degree where, we were able to fix it. So it's so ridiculous. And of course, the person who has to disagree with everything we say in the chat, they made the Pac-12 a disaster. Then work to fix it. Again, why was it a disaster? Because the person you all voted to be the president of your conference ruined you. That's again on you. All these things are things like, oh, I can't believe that this person that we chose to lead us screwed everything up. And they act like Larry Scott was doing these things that the schools were like completely against. Like, we did not support that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. He ruined us. We were fighting against. No, you morons voted for this guy and kept him in power. You supported the stupid things he was doing. This is on you. It's just like I go out and borrow a bunch of money, and then for some stupid idea that I'm going to do, it doesn't work. And then I'm like, well, somebody else has to pay back my loan. I can't be responsible for this. This has got to be somebody else's fault. I know I chose to do it. I know my stupid idea didn't work because it was a stupid idea, and I have no idea how to make homemade butter, and I thought it'd be a great idea for me to stop doing Irish Breakdown to make homemade butter and sell it to people in Alaska. And it didn't work, and now you should have to pay me for this because, like, I had no choice in this matter. Like, no, you made me take this. It's also dumb. And for people to act like, well, the Pac-12 was a mess. They should have left. They're part of the reason the Pac-12 was a mess. Like, you guys understand that, right? You guys understand that when you hire a president of your conference, he doesn't have autonomy to do whatever he wants independent of what the school's wishes are. That's not how this works. They elect him to carry out their wishes. So I get so tired of the people that are like, well, they should have done this and they should have done that. No, they shouldn't have. Y'all made this bed. Lay in it. And say, well, we're going to get rid of the Notre Dame series because of travel. No, it's not that. It's not that at all. So, like, that's the real. We need to get away from it. That's not the problem. The problem is this. It goes back to what Sean and I talked about yesterday. Schools don't want to get into the playoff and really care that much about winning it. They want to get into the playoff so they get the bigger cut of the money. Because when you get into the playoff, you get a bigger cut of the pie. Now, if you want to maximize the amount of money you can make in the playoff, go be independent. Do what Notre Dame does. And they get all of it. But no, we want to be part of a league that pays us more, and we want to get into the playoff because we'll then make more. It has nothing to do with, hey, we don't want to play them. And here's the other thing. Your president of your new league is trying to fight for automatic playoff bids. So it doesn't matter if Notre Dame beats you 175-0. If you finish in the top 4 in your league, you're still in the playoffs. So what your president is advocating for no longer really matters a whole lot because you could go 0 for 3 in the non-conference. And as long as you rank in the top 4 of your own conference, you're getting into the playoff if what they're fighting for holds. So why does it matter? Will you play Notre Dame? So there's no way to spin this into anything other than it's a money grab by the school, and Lincoln Riley's a coward who wants to run away from another fight to make life easier for him. He doesn't want to plan for a championship. He has no clue how to win a championship. He wants a schedule for the postseason because this is a guy that got handed a great program by Bob Stoops and said, don't screw it up, and he screwed it up. And then when does he leave Oklahoma? Why does he leave Oklahoma? Did he just up and decide, you know what? I've taken Oklahoma as far as I can take them. I know that Bob Stoops won a championship, and I know that Barry Switzer won multiple championships, and I know Bud Wilkerson won championships, but it's just you can't win titles here anymore. Is that why he left? He left because Oklahoma decided to join the SEC, and he wanted no part of that. Now, he could have gone to LSU. LSU wanted him instead of Brian Kelly. That's a much better job than USC. In the last 40 years, USC's only really been a truly dominant program during one 9-year span of Pete Carroll. That's it. Whereas LSU has won a title with 3 different coaches. He chose to go to USC. Why? Does he have better relationship there? Is he from? No, he's from Texas, which borders on what state? Does Texas border to the east, Trev? Yeah, that'd be Louisiana. He went there because it was an easier path. He wanted to be part of the Pac-12, and then they screwed him over by joining the Big Ten and like, well, now we're in a hard league again. And he wants to get Notre Dame off the schedule and Ole Miss off the schedule so that he can go schedule his way into success and hopefully, go 10-2 in the non-conference, in the go what would be 7-2 in your league, dominate your soft non-conference, and we're getting in at 10-2. That's what we want. That's what we want. That's all he's doing because he runs away from a fight. That's what Lincoln Riley does. He's run away from every fight he's had in his coaching career since he's been a head coach. Big 12, bye-bye, we're going to the SEC. Okay, well, I'm out of here. And how did he reward Oklahoma for hiring him and doing all that? I'm going to take half your roster. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take half your roster. That's how much I love and respect you guys. I'm going to take half your roster. I'm going to go over there because it's going to be easier there. Screw the SEC. If I wanted to go to the SEC, I might have stayed at Oklahoma. I didn't want any part of the SEC. So he runs to USC. And what frustrates me is that how many USC fans, and look, this isn't Notre Dame fans, we're so much better because there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that ran cover for Brian Kelly doing similar things for a long time as well. Right? So, but you see all these USC fans saying like, well, Notre Dame wants to play us, they should join the Big Ten. Why? What does that have to do with anything? I mean, that's the dumbest, lamest thing you could possibly say. USC doesn't want to play this game for 2 reasons. One reason from the president, it's about money. The reason for Lincoln Riley, because he's a coward and doesn't want to play tough teams out of conference. It really is as simple as that. And I'm just happy that somebody other than Notre Dame people are finally bringing attention to this, because Lincoln Riley absolutely, Pat Forty absolutely talked about how that's at the heart of a lot of this, if we're being honest.
I think the thing that I get the most frustrated about is when people talk about USC and their schedule and they have to play 9 games in the Big Ten. It's like, and are there 9 playoff contending teams in the Big Ten? People make it sound like every single week that, yep, week 1, they're at Ohio State, and then week 2, they're at Oregon, then week 3, they're at Washington, then week 4, they're in Happy Valley, and then week 5, they're in the Big House. It's like their schedule doesn't look like that.
Not even
like, you get no sympathy from me as a Notre Dame fan. We have to travel. It's like I watched Notre Dame play in New York in a night game, and then the following week they played in LA.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. Like, that doesn't hold any weight to me. You complain about travel. Notre Dame's been doing that for a long time. Then you start talking about they have to play 9 games in the Big Ten. Notre Dame plays 10 Power 4 opponents this year. The 2 Power 4 opponents they don't play is Boise State, who was in the playoff last season, and Navy, who was ranked and beat an SEC team in a bowl game.
Won 10 games, right?
None of those arguments carry a weight to me. It's like, well, Notre Dame has Purdue on their schedule. Yeah, so does USC. But for USC, it's a Big Ten matchup in Big Ten. Like,
we have to
for
travel
Dame,
to West Lafayette, right?
That's what I'm saying. But for Notre Dame, it's like, you guys play Purdue. That's an easy win.
Right.
Look, that's the stuff that gets me fired up when talking about this. Is everybody talking about USC playing what Georgia's schedule was last season? And they didn't. They played what USC's schedule was last season and lost like 6 games. And so you can miss me with the whole travel stuff. You can miss me with they have to play X amount of Big Ten games. It's frustrating.
And what's funny is when you look at USC last year and you look at the games they lost, who beat them last year? Like, okay, Penn State beat them at their own place. You didn't have to travel for that game. You had a 20-3 lead against them last year, and you blew a lead. Like, was that because of the travel, how hard that was? No, it wasn't. You lost to a Michigan team that went 8-5. You lost to a Minnesota team last year that went 8-5. Minnesota. You lost to Penn State by 3. Great. You lost to a Maryland team that went 4-8. You lost to a Washington team that went 6-7. And then you finally lost to another good team when Notre Dame beat you. I mean, they act like they were out there getting smashed by murderers row. They went 7-6 last year. Didn't play Oregon. Didn't play. I mean, you played a bad Michigan team and got beat. You didn't have to play Ohio State last year. Like, is Notre Dame the reason you didn't make the playoff last year? And I saw this one guy on Twitter. He's like, well, we never get rewarded. To my USC, we never get rewarded for playing, a tough schedule. I'm like, really? You never get rewarded for playing a tough schedule, huh? All right. So let's go back to the playoff era. USC has been good 3 times, the playoff era. 3 times. And in those times, so let's pull this up, Mr. USC never gets credit for their schedule. Okay, so here's some facts about USC not getting credit for their schedule. USC's been good 3 times, 16, 17, and 22. Can we agree on that, Trevor? Those are the only years they even remotely sniffed the top 10. In 2016, USC was the 2nd highest ranked 3-loss team in the country. Despite getting beat by Bama 52-6, they ranked 9th with 3 losses. 9th with 3 losses. And in a 16-team playoff or 12-team playoff, they'd be in the playoff. In 2017, USC was the 2nd highest ranked 2-loss team in the country behind only Ohio State, despite losing to Notre Dame 49-14. They got credit for losing to a very good Notre Dame team. 2nd highest ranked 2-loss team in the country. And in 2022, going into the Pac-12 championship game, USC was not only number 4 in the playoff rankings, meaning beat Utah and you're in, they were the highest ranked 1-loss team in the country. The 3 teams ahead of them, it was TCU, I believe Michigan, and I'd have to go look at, but 3 of the teams ahead of them were undefeated. And so it's like, well, dude, is it the committee's fault that you couldn't beat Utah? Not only couldn't beat Utah, you got smashed by Utah again, who also beat you in the regular season. So it's like they act like they're getting knocked out because of Notre Dame. Name me one time Notre Dame has knocked them out where they were deserving of something. Notre Dame beats them in October in 2017. Well, that knocked them out. Yeah, because they lost to Washington State 2 weeks before. If you don't lose to Washington State, you might be in the playoff as a 2-loss team or a 1-loss team. So those are the things that just frustrate the heck out of me, is like people will convince themselves of some of the dumbest things, Trevor, and it absolutely drives me nuts. How people will just convince themselves of absolute, TCU, Michigan, and Georgia were all ranked ahead of USC. They were ranked ahead of that season in 2022. They were ranked ahead of that Ohio State team that went out and almost beat Georgia in the playoffs. If USC doesn't just fold in their matchup against Utah, Ohio State's out and USC's in the college football playoff. You had destiny in front of you. Year one of Lincoln Riley. You're in the playoff if you just beat Utah. It was a rematch game. Who loses rematch games? Look what Ohio State did to Oregon this year when they had a rematch. Look what LSU did, or look what Bama did to LSU in a rematch in 2011. Look what Georgia did to Auburn in a rematch in 2017. Most rematches where you're supposedly the better team don't end well. Remember, what was it, 2018? Texas beat Oklahoma in the regular season. Lincoln Riley said, what did you do to them? And when you played them in the conference championship, you smacked them. That's what good coaches, good teams do. They go out there and get blasted by Utah. Did the schedule stop you from doing that? You played Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was hot going into that game. Like Notre Dame in 2022 going into that USC game was smacking people in 2022, Trev. They had beaten UNLV. They went on the road and beat a ranked Syracuse team by 17. They blew out Clemson, who was ranked number 4. They beat Navy in a game that was weird. They were up big and let them come back. And then they were coming off a 44-0 win over Boston College. That Notre Dame team was hot, and USC smacked them. Notre Dame would try to come back, and then USC would go back ahead. Notre Dame tried to come back, USC go back ahead. You beating Notre Dame helped get you to that spot.
Yeah.
It helped get you to that spot. It benefited you to play that game, because here's a little reality check for you. USC had to climb up, because going into the Notre Dame game, USC was 6th. They were behind 4 undefeated teams. They were behind Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU going into the last week of the year. Behind LSU in 2022. And they go out, and obviously Ohio State gets beat by Michigan, and LSU goes out and gets beat by Texas A&M. USC, hey, like, are you going to be like those other teams, or hey, are you going to go out there and win this football game? And they won that football game. And they were just barely ahead of Clemson, barely ahead of Alabama in the rankings. All of a sudden, those teams go out and win some games, maybe, but they get to play a ranked Notre Dame team, a hot Notre Dame team, beat them, and that boosts you up to number 4 in the playoff rankings going into the Pac-12 title game. That was on you. Blame Notre Dame for that.
Which I'm glad you brought that up, because there's also a narrative flying around there that, Notre Dame being on, Notre Dame and USC playing each other does more for Notre Dame than it does for USC. I've seen that narrative flying around too. Saying that Notre Dame's schedule is made around USC. Here's a fun fact for you. And I went and looked this up before the show started. Since 2010, do you know how many times USC has been ranked when they've played Notre Dame? Do you know?
2010?
Yep, since 2010.
2010? Oh, something like 4 or 5 times?
4.
Yeah.
Yeah, how many times Notre Dame has been ranked during that time?
Most of the years, almost all but one, all but 2. They weren't ranked in 14, and they weren't ranked in 16, right?
9 of the times they've been ranked at the time that they've played. But again, there's another narrative going around that Notre Dame needs USC on the schedule, so their strength of schedule is better and it boosts their season. That's an easy narrative to say and walk away from when you've lost as many times since 2010 as USC has to Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's just all of those narratives that are just like, hey, like, that's just incorrect. Notre Dame is traveling down and playing in SEC. What game did Notre Dame fans and the national media walk away talking about Notre Dame? from last season. They went into Texas A&M and beat Texas A&M. You know, they went down and on 2 neutral site fields, beat ranked undefeated service academy teams. They beat Louisville at home. I don't remember USC being mentioned when they talked about playoff resumes and what they were able to do.
If anything, playing USC hurt Notre Dame because people kept saying, like, well, man, like they struggled to beat a US. Like I heard Josh Pate talking about this, how USC gave them everything they could handle. I'm like, well, they kind of did, but let's not forget that Notre Dame literally never trailed in that game. Like not for a second was Notre Dame ever trailed. Not even like Indiana, where I think Indiana goes up 3-0 on Notre Dame. No, it wasn't Indiana. It was who was the team that Notre Dame played? No, Indiana didn't go up on them 3-0. It was
Stanford did.
Stanford. And then
Stanford
Georgia
went
Tech
up like
had an
7-0.
early lead on them. I mean, there's plenty of times where teams took early leads on Notre Dame. Georgia took an early lead on Notre Dame 3-0. Penn State had a 10-0 lead. You know, like USC never led Notre Dame. But every time somebody wants to ding Notre Dame, what do they point to? Well, you barely beat USC. It's hurt them more than it's helped them. You don't see Notre Dame like, we need to get out of this rivalry and play somebody good. You know, we've dominated USC. You never heard Lou Holtz talk about, can we get USC off the schedule and play someone that might actually beat us, please? I mean, and Lou Holtz can be like, hey, look, guys, we're already playing Michigan. We already got to play Miami. We got to play Penn State. Like, gosh, can we please get out of this schedule? This is just too hard for us. So I just look at these, Trevor, and it's just like, let's be honest about this. I just wish schools would be more honest and just say, hey, listen, we think the best way to get to the playoff is to try to make our schedule as easy as possible, and it's important for us to get to the playoff because that's how we make money. Just be honest about it. Don't give us this nonsense of what they're saying. But I just want to read a couple comments that Pat Forty said. He's talking about the rivalry. He said the latter category is also why the USC Trojans Notre Dame Fighting Irish series, the greatest intersectional. He got that totally wrong. It's not the greatest intersectional.
I know.
Rivalry. It's the greatest transcontinental rivalry.
It is. What a goofy guy.
Seriously, like he loses all respect, all credibility on that comment right there by a wide margin, is in danger of being killed off. It would be unconscionable loss for the sport and a further erosion of what makes college football special with no adequate excuses, and yet it might happen. The two athletic programs were scheduled to further discuss the future of the series Monday. As it stands now, the game October 18th in South Bend is the last scheduled meeting between the Blue Bloods. USC offered a 1-year extension to the contract, adding a game in 2026 in Los Angeles, but Notre Dame rejected that in pursuit of another long-term deal in a rivalry that has been played 95 times dating back to 1924. Notre Dame and USC haven't played on 2 occasions. There was that stretch right in the middle of World War II, and then the COVID year. That's it. He also said there's considerable speculation that Trojans coach Lincoln Riley is unenthusiastic about continuing the series in its traditional format. The reluctance regarding a long-term renewal of the series as it's currently constructed is rooted in the Trojans' move to the Big Ten last year, and that's when he went on to talk about all the travel. He said, now here's the one thing I did want to talk about. Get your thoughts on this, Trev. He made a comment about what USC is proposing to Notre Dame to try to continue the series. He said sources tell SI that one of USC's suggested alterations to the Notre Dame series is playing it on the front end of the schedule, potentially with some neutral site locations sprinkled in among games at each other's homes. That would be more Trojan-led teardown of football tradition. The school is chiseling away at its athletic identity little by little. At this point, USC might as well leave the LA Coliseum for some new stadium in Orange County, get rid of Tommy Trojan and Traveler, replace the iconic fight song and the timeless uniforms. And he says USC, this is heavy, USC has arguably done more than any other school to decimate the sport as we once knew it. And then he talks about, because my first thought was, well, Texas, I think, has done more than that. But he brought up a good point. Texas and the Big 12 didn't become a thing till the 90s. Texas is a Southwest Conference team. They were never a Big 8 team. Their time in the Big 12 lasted 20, 30 years. That's it. But he talked about how USC, and I thought that was interesting. But, Trev, what do you think about that? 2 aspects of that. Number one is moving the game to early in the year. Some people have talked about like season opener, one of the first couple early games. And then like having, which we've mentioned before is possible if you sign a three-game deal with the team, home and away in a neutral site. I'm not opposed to that with certain teams. I am opposed to that with a rivalry game. But overall, what were your thoughts on USC's proposals to move the game up to September and maybe have some neutral site games sprinkled in there?
In short, I think it's silly because I don't know what that accomplishes. You know, I mean, if their whole gripe is, well, we have to play 9 Big Ten teams and the travel sucks. Okay, well, last I checked, the distance from LA to South Bend is the same in October as it is in September.
Right.
Last I checked. Last I checked, unless they plan on leaving the Big Ten, they're still going to have to play 9 Big Ten teams a year. And I think it's even more ironic that you'd want to play a team in Notre Dame that has physically dominated you for the better half of a decade and a half, and then go play Big Ten teams. And so I don't really get that. I mean, that's just, I mean, do they really not like playing in the cold that much? Like, is it literally just the temperature? Like,
but you are now. Like, you are now. You are playing games in November at those places now. You can't avoid that anymore. Yeah.
And so, like, is it just they don't want to travel later in the year? Genuinely, I'm asking. I don't know what the benefit of playing in September. I get the neutral site thing because we don't have to travel that far. And then there's a good bet that all of the neutral site games that they play are going to be west of Missouri. It's like, yeah, we can play in Texas and the western
Las
part
Vegas
of Texas.
and right.
Yeah, we can play in the Rose Bowl if we wanted to, call it a neutral site game. It's, yeah, okay. But that I get that benefit, but I don't understand this. If there's going to be somebody that dies on the hill of, well, they have X amount of Big Ten games and they're in this conference and Notre Dame isn't wanting to join a conference, we don't see the benefit, but we'll play in September. I don't get that. Like, I don't understand the argument for that line of thinking.
If the game doesn't work, the game doesn't work. Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So I don't get it. If you're going to put, and especially depending on when it falls in September, it's like, yeah, we can play you, September 28th. It's like, then why don't you wait 2 weeks and play in South Bend on October 12th? Well, we have to travel and then we have all these Big Ten games. And it's like, okay,
right.
Well,
they don't want it. Like, once they get to Big Ten play, they want it to just stay in Big Ten play. Well, why wasn't that issue when you were in the Pac-12? I mean, you had no problem doing it then. I mean, people act like USC, like all the Pac-12 teams are just, 20 minutes down the road. First of all, you fly to all these places, so like, let's stop acting like that every Pac-12 school is within 5 minutes of each other. I mean, do you know how long of a drive it is from Los Angeles to Seattle?
Oh, gosh.
17 and a half hours. Like, that's a long trip. Like, that's not right down the street. I mean? So it's like you're getting on a plane to go to all these places anyway. And here's the other thing. You chose this. You chose to get into this league. It's a 13 and a half hour drive to get to Eugene, Oregon. And by the way, you guys just brought teams from Utah into your league and Colorado and Boulder, Colorado into your league. Like, it is not that much further of a trip to go to Boulder, Colorado than it is to Lincoln, Nebraska. I've driven through Lincoln, Nebraska on my way to Ohio from Denver. So the whole thing is just, it's nonsense. My thing is, if I was Notre Dame, I'd say, okay, cool. You know what? Now that you're open to moving the game, I have a counter proposal to you. In an attempt to somewhat maintain our tradition of playing each other, instead of moving the game up into September, how about this? How about we do every year what we've been willing to do every other year when we have to travel out to your place after Thanksgiving? So cool. This is a great idea. How about we just stick this game every year at the end of the season? And then the Big Ten will work with the Big Ten and say, hey, listen, we're going to have this rivalry. Can you guys work with us and help us out when it comes to, because the schedule for the Big Ten does not go beyond 2028. I'm sure that the AD for USC could say, hey, could you guys help us out a little bit? And, with our November schedule, like you did in 2024, when our road games at the end of the year were Washington and Oregon. I mean, like, it's not like they haven't helped them before, Trev. I mean, what were the road games they played last year? I'm sorry, they played Washington on November 2nd. They had a bye. They were at home against Nebraska. Then they played at UCLA. Then they were home against Notre Dame. In 2025, their November schedule, they got to play at Nebraska, home against Northwestern, home against Iowa, at Oregon, home against UCLA. Well, we can't move that game because we already play UCLA at home. Well, you clearly have no problem moving rivalry games, so why don't you move the UCLA game to the middle of the year? You don't play them in the last game of the regular season when you play us. So, why do we have to move that one? Well, when we play at their place, it's always a week before we play you. All right, then just do that permanently. Then you've just solved your problem. You've just solved your November problem of being worried about having to travel. Because every year, your last two games are going to be against Notre Dame and UCLA. That's it. And the Big Ten will work with you on that. Big Ten already does that when they have to play Notre Dame at home, don't they? There you go.
Well, that's a good point. And you're also not going to convince, not you, but people aren't going to convince me that the Big Ten is making them do this.
Right.
It's like, I also disagree with that, or else the Big Ten wouldn't have been okay with Ohio State playing Texas in week 1. This is a USC thing. Like, yes, I understand that this big move for the Big Ten and the SEC to take over, which is very real. I don't want to discredit that. But then why are other stronger members comparatively to USC going out and scheduling very strong out-of-conference games? Because the last I checked, Ohio State still has to play 8 or 9 Big Ten teams, and they're starting off their season against Ohio State. Mm-hmm. You got Georgia and Clemson playing last season, albeit it was a neutral site game. They didn't have to play them, the eventual ACC conference champion winners. This is just a USC thing. And that's what really, really frustrates me about all this. Is there's a lot of it, well, it's because of this and the travel. And yes, big picture, USC elected to join the Big Ten anyways. But that aside, the Big Ten as a conference is still, like Michigan played Texas out of conference last season. Mm-hmm. They didn't have to do that. They were coming off of a national championship win. They could have easily scheduled Eastern Michigan if they wanted to, or Central Michigan, or Western Michigan, like they've done in previous years. Like, that's fine. Do that. But they didn't. They're electing to go out and do these other things. I just, yeah.
I don't hear a peep out of Columbus about wanting to get out of the series against Alabama in 27-28.
Nope.
Or the Georgia series in 2030 and 2021, which they signed in 19 and 20. I don't hear a peep about that. That's a team that has to play Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan every single year. So it is very annoying. 2027, they play Ohio State. The rest of their schedule is Iowa, Maryland, Washington, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, UCLA, and Wisconsin. I mean, okay, 2028. All right. I get it. 2028, your schedule would be a little bit tough. You've got at Michigan, at Oregon, home against Penn State, but it's an odd year. It's an even year, so you'd get Notre Dame at home. So you'd have Notre Dame at home, Penn State at home, Purdue at home, Nebraska at home, Iowa at home. You'd have road games at Michigan State, at Northwestern, at UCLA, at Michigan, at Oregon. So it's like, okay, that's a challenging schedule, but that same season, Notre Dame, if they played USC, would play USC, Texas, Arkansas, Clemson, and Miami. Notre Dame's not trying to get out. Man, we got to play Texas. We got to play Arkansas. We've got to play Clemson. We've got to play Miami. Like, no, you know what? USC, we're going to let you walk on this one because we get it. Notre Dame in 2029, Trev. We don't know what USC's schedule is going to be in 2029. The Big Ten has not gone past 2028. Notre Dame in 2029 plays Alabama, at Texas, at Florida State, at Clemson, at NC State, at Syracuse. So they're going to add USC to that and get USC at home. You don't hear them crying about our schedule's too tough. Our schedule's too tough. They just added Clemson to that schedule. They already knew they had to play Alabama. They knew they had to play Texas already. They knew they had to play at Florida State already. And they said, we'll go ahead and add Clemson and we'll play them on the road. So I don't want to hear crybabies about, how tough the schedule is and how much travel they have to do and all these other kind of things. Notre Dame that year has to travel to South Florida, to Tampa to play USF. They have to travel to Texas. They have to travel to Florida again, North Carolina, New York's an easy trip, and then down to South Carolina. And in 2029, that'd be an even year, so they'd get USC at home. And they have other games they have to schedule. So my frustration is simply it's USC has no respect for the tradition of the game. They don't. And that's my frustration. This whole, well, if you want to keep playing us, join the Big Ten stuff is stupid. If Michigan State, and Purdue aren't going to be enough to get us into the Big Ten, you think you are? Like, and here's the hard truth for USC. Here's what they don't realize. They need that rivalry a lot more than Notre Dame does. Because if Notre Dame said, you know what, screw you. You don't want to play us, we want to play us. Pete Bavacco puts out the statement, hey, we're looking for a new long-term partner to play. You don't think Michigan's going to get on the phone and be like, hey, let's renew this thing? Yes, they will. You don't think other big-time programs are going to get on the phone and be like, hey, we'll play you. Look what Clemson just did. You think Clemson's the only team in the country that's like, dude, we would love to have this schedule. And wait till the Big Ten tries to push to a TV-driven scheduling, then USC's going to be like, hey, we were just playing. We're just joking. We'd love to play you guys again. There you go. You know that they'll be able to replace USC, no problem. USC's going to – because here's the thing. If the Big Ten is tough, you lose 2 games. You better hope you're 11-1, because if you go 10-2, you might be toast with the non-conference games that they're talking about trying to schedule. You're going to be in trouble. And, you know, I have no sympathy for them at that point in time, Trev. None at all. Because you're choosing this. This is your choice. You wanted this. You know, so they got Fresno on their schedule in 2026. They'd have 2 games they have to fill. Do you really think they're going to replace Notre Dame with LSU or Ole Miss or some good team? No, they're not. They're going to play somebody soft because that's what they want. So careful what you wish for, Trev.
No, absolutely. To me, it's on a very real note. It's just sad because we talk on the show a lot about the differences in generations of what you got to watch and experience versus what I got to watch and experience. And the USC rivalry was something that was consistent. We could both talk about what those games meant. And we could both talk about the impact that it had. In some seasons, it had playoff implications and championship implications. Notre Dame played them in 2022. Even if Notre Dame would have beat USC, they're not making the playoffs that season. But Notre Dame lost to USC, which helped propel USC into that conversation before they blew their opportunity in the Pac-12 championship game. You know, you talk about all of the super fun games that have came out of it on either side. And that's what makes a great rivalry. And the fact that that's going to go away is because of one side is really, really frustrating. Because then going back, bringing this full circle, big picture is like, okay, so then what's still sacred then in college football? Where does the line get drawn? Because if I had to draw a line in the sand, I would have, a couple years ago, I would have assumed that the Notre Dame USC rivalry was relatively safe. And here we are on the doorstep of it being ready to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kills me. And that's really, really frustrating. And so if that's what they want to do, then fine. But
well, and the thing is, Trevor, is if you want to talk about keeping you from winning championships, I mean, Notre Dame and USC this is not new. I mean, Eric Parsegian's legacy would look way different if he didn't have to play USC. Mm-hmm. Way different. 1964, Era's first year at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is undefeated and ranked number 1 in college football. And they had to go out and play at USC last game of the year, and USC beat them that year. So John McKay and them beat them that year. And, there's been other years. It was in 1970. Notre Dame is ranked number 2 in the country. They beat number 7 LSU. They go out and play USC at USC, lose 38-28. And then Notre Dame goes to the Cotton Bowl and beats Texas in the Cotton Bowl in 1970. I mean, this is something that's happened plenty of times where Notre Dame has, and sometimes Notre Dame's had a chance to beat USC and couldn't do it. Notre Dame was ranked number 10 in 1972. USC was ranked number 1. Notre Dame went out and beat USC. USC beat Notre Dame, and that helps them solidify their spot. They beat Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. They win a championship. You want to beat a be the champ, then go beat somebody. You know, I mean, this happens all the time. I mean, Eric Parsegian's last year, Notre Dame loses a game early to Purdue. They climb all the way up to number 5. They got to go play at number 6 USC, and they lose that football game in 1974. So, I mean, these things have happened plenty of times. I mean, like I said, Eric would have at least 2 more national titles, maybe another one, if he didn't have to play USC all the time. Mm-hmm. And so this notion of, and Notre Dame's had plenty of chances to ruin USC season. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. And, 1988, Notre Dame's last year of win a national title. Notre Dame had to beat a top 5 Michigan team at home. They had to beat the number 1 Miami team at home. And their reward for the tough schedule they played that year that included playing Penn State is last game of the year, they got to go play at USC, number 2 USC. What did Notre Dame do that day? They handled business. And so they went and won a national championship. You want to be the champ, then prove that you can beat the best teams. Especially in a 16th. Like, if there was ever a time to get rid of that rivalry, it's back when you couldn't afford a loss. Now's not the time, because now you can sustain a loss and still get in. So it really is, if we're just being real about it, it's money desires on the administration side and Lincoln Riley's unwillingness to play a tough schedule because he's a coward that doesn't understand how to build a champion. And that's really what it boils down to. We had a super chat about this topic that we'll get to before we move on to the sophomore conversation, Trevor. Rob Osgood, thank you so much for your super chat. He says, USC doesn't want Notre Dame anywhere in Southern Cali because of recruiting. Neutral site takes Indy away from Southern California. Rob, I think there's some truth to that. Because if you do that, then what tends to happen is, what would most likely happen is, you'd go home, away, neutral, home, away. Neutral, home, away, neutral. So you'd actually put like 5 years in between kind of having to play at their place. 4 years, 3-4 years in between. So instead of every other year getting out to California, or how it had been for a while, Notre Dame's out in California every year, you get this game back. Well, I think there's something to that. I just don't think that's the driver. Yeah. I think that's a benefit of getting out of it. I don't think that's I don't think that financially it makes sense for us to play Notre Dame. It helps us build our resume. It helps us, playing a team like Notre Dame, the physicality of Notre Dame. If we can beat them regularly, then we know we can go toe-to-toe with this team and that team and all that. There's a lot of positives to it. But you know what? We don't want them recruiting in our area. I don't think that's a driver. I just think that's a side effect. That's a benefit that I'm sure they're aware of that they would like to get out of it, but I don't think it's the driver. So, yeah. Anything else to add, Trev, to this conversation before we move on to the sophomore discussion?
Nothing outside of what we've already covered. It's sad that it's gotten to this point. It is interesting that now this is coming to the light of the national media. And we've been talking about this for quite some time, but you can throw up a hope and a prayer that the rivalry is going to continue the good tradition that is college football and maintaining one of its oldest and richest rivalries. But if you need 2 teams to play a game, and if one of them doesn't want to be on the field with you, then that's on them.
Yep. Yeah, and just a reminder, Notre Dame is not the only USC is not the only Power 4 team whose main rival is a non-conference opponent. There's actually several. Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina are 2 pretty big ones to speak of, obviously, at that point in time. So anyway, Trev, that's going to do it for this part of the show. We're going to get into some sophomore conversation here in a minute, folks. But before we do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that. And as always, make sure that you are on the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We're doing some renovations at the board. We are in the process of a server change. We did that a couple weeks ago, and there's going to be some changes and days where the tags might go away for a little bit or it might be slower a little bit. Just know when those things happen that it's part of this change we're making that's going to make the site so much better, give us a lot of opportunities to do other things. If there is an issue that you're having, just go and shoot me an email, Bryan@irishbreakdown.com, and we'll go ahead and get that handled for you. But that is definitely the place that you want to be, boards.irishbreakdown.com. So Trevor Trowbridge, my man, I am really excited to get into this next conversation because this sophomore class in Notre Dame has me really fired up. And we're going to talk about it. And so when we're doing our breakdowns of the team and you're looking at the different topics we want to discuss and star power and breakout players and step up time and role players in depth. And every time Trev and I are having these conversations, there's always this focus on the sophomore class. And the sophomore class is just going to kind of litter the depth chart this year. And started thinking about it. And as we discussed it, it's like, this isn't necessarily a good thing. I mean, it's not ideal to have a team that has so driven by sophomores and redshirt freshmen. And this, for the purpose of this conversation, we're talking about basically the 2024 class, not redshirt sophomores and those type. I mean, we're talking true second-year players in college, the sophomores, the true sophomores, of the redshirt freshmen. And you started looking at it and you start realizing, like, one of the exciting things about this Notre Dame team is that it's such a talented team. The issue, and I think it's legitimate to call it an issue, or the concern, is that a lot of that high-level talent are true sophomores, which means this Notre Dame team is going to be more reliant on very young players, and in some cases they're experienced, in some cases they're not, at very important positions than what you normally see for a team competing for a championship. There's been some exceptions, and we'll talk about that during this discussion, Trevor, but as you kick this thing off, you have to look at it and be excited that, man, the sophomore class is so talented, but then also be willing to say, but they are young, and we don't yet know how ready that group of players is to become a primary driver behind a 16-game national championship run. And that sort of that balance that has to be struck in sort of what makes the sophomore conversation a little bit, I mean, you have to be balanced in it. You have to say, boy, I'm excited about the talent, but then also say, but dude, there's not a lot of teams that have won titles that are driven in a lot of ways by such a young class. And then those teams see championships, which makes this sophomore class, the responsibility and the role they're going to have, vitally important, but also pressure-packed as well.
If Notre Dame didn't have the season that they had last year, that was fueled by a lot of young talent, I'd be significantly more nervous about them relying on the 2024 recruiting class in certain areas. But I start thinking about some of the sophomores from the 2024 season that had a major impact. I think of the Adon Schulers, the Christian Grays, the Drake Bowens, Jeremiah Loves, the players who up until that point, when they got their moment, there were some question marks. We were very high on the talent. We said that their ceilings are extremely high, but we haven't seen them do it a whole lot. Jeremiah Love was behind Audric Estime in 23. Drake Bowen was behind J.D. Bertrand in 23. Adon Schuler was behind the DJ Brown, Ramon Henderson kind of duo in 23. So we didn't get to see a whole lot of it. And then, of course, Christian Gray was behind Cam Hart and Ben Morrison. And so last season, we got to see a little bit of this sophomore surge and how young Notre Dame's team truly was. Now, those sophomores, Jaden Greathouse, throw him in that mix. Absolutely. Sorry, Salty, I didn't mean to forget your guy there. But you look at all the players who, as sophomores last year, played such key roles in the biggest moments. And some it was season long. You look at Jeremiah Love and what he did in his sophomore season. All season long was that guy, unfortunately, until he got hurt, and then still found a way to kind of be that guy in the Penn State game running on half a leg. But then you had others in moments, which is what Notre Dame is going to need this class to do. So I say all that to say I feel a lot more confident about their reliance at certain positions in the sophomore class due to what we got to see on the field last year. Because big picture, the way that I look at it, it's a net positive. Because we're talking about a class that no matter what has to come back to college football for the 2026 season. A lot of these kids are going to get invaluable experience on the field for what we are predicting to be a 14, 15, potentially 16 game long season. And so if this sophomore class plays a huge role in it, that's why I've heard you talk about it before, and we've talked about it before on the show. It's like, 2026 could be that year. But a breakout at some of these positions that we're getting ready to talk about, if that happens, it would not shock me that if Notre Dame reaches what we believe their peak to be in 2026, they reach that this upcoming season. And that's a really exciting conversation to have.
I like the point you're making, Trevor, about the group, but here would be my one counter to why I do think it's a little bit different this season compared to last season. And that really comes down to, I think the difference is last year it was I mean, plenty of young players. You had a sophomore running back, two starting sophomores at wide receiver until one of them got hurt. But then he came back and played a ton. You had a true freshman at left tackle, a true sophomore at left guard, and then you had a starting sophomore at Mike linebacker, a true sophomore, and he was a redshirt freshman in the Don Schuler, but I'm going with grade. A sophomore at safety, a starting sophomore at corner, and then eventually you had a true freshman playing at the other cornerback spot. What makes this a little bit different for me is the fact that this year it's going to be players that are at more key positions. And whereas last year, yeah, you had a true freshman at left tackle, but you had a veteran mobile quarterback who was a senior there. And whereas this year, it's going to be more about, looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, you're going to be older on offense this year as a whole. I mean, last year you had a sophomore, like I said, true sophomore running back, two true sophomore starting a receiver, true freshman at left tackle, and a true sophomore at left guard. Eventually got beat out and older, but I'm talking about the start of the season. This year, you're only going to have two of those such players. You're going to have a true sophomore at quarterback and a true sophomore at left tackle. And my point is, those are pretty important positions. And then, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of where it comes down to. And I think that's really where a lot more of my concern for these things are kind of rooted in, like, it's going to be a bit of a dependent thing. But then last year you had a lot of those starters that were younger, but a lot of the backups that were rotating in were older players. Whereas this year you're going to have some vets, but now your depth is dominated by the younger players. Are they ready to step up and play that role? And I think that's what makes this a little bit intriguing, to where it's not that you're not wrong at all. I'm excited about this sophomore class. It's just that we have to be willing to admit as a fan base that in some of these very important positions, we don't really know how they're going to perform. Sure. And the concern is that some of these positions are going to be very, very important positions where, you're going to be talking about, okay, you're going to be pretty young at some spots. And so I think at some very key spots, your depth is driven by younger players. And the fact that there's a couple spots where your depth isn't great if those young guys don't step up. I think about receiver. You really need your younger players to step up for depth. Are they ready or not? And whereas last year, Jaden Greathouse didn't have to play a bunch of snaps because you had Jaden Harrison and Jordan Faison and Chris Mitchell all part of sort of that rotation there. You didn't have to rely on Jaden to dominate this, 80% of the snaps. Same with Jordan Faison. So you could stay fresher. This year, it's like, well, who are those rotation guys? Because right now, there's only 4 receivers, for example, that I'm saying I'm confident those guys can go play. Last year, your sophomores that you were depending upon, and this is another difference with some of these positions, when you look at Jeremiah Love and Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison, guys that were dependent upon last year a lot, they'd played a bunch the year before. Where this year, when I look at the depth chart of CJ Carr and Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams and Logan Saldate, those are not guys that have played a lot of football. Sure. And so there's that, well, the talent is there, but they're a little bit more unproven. It's different up front because obviously Anthony Knapp played a bunch of football last year, but you're an injury away from Jack Larson being thrust into the 2 deep as a true sophomore, redshirt freshman eligibility, who's never played a meaningful down of college football in an offense where tight end's kind of an important position. And that's what's a little bit different about this group than last year's group, where, like Drake Bowen is a guy that didn't play a whole lot last year, but he was a very heavily used on special teams. Don Schuler, was a guy that was a redshirt sophomore. Christian Gray had played a bunch the year before as a true freshman. Leonard Moore had a lot of time to kind of get up to speed before he took in, but he was a unique player. He's a bit of a unicorn. And I don't think you can point to him as like, well, he did it, so-and-so can do it, right? It's a little bit of a different deal. But I think that's the difference here for me, Trevor, is there are some guys that are more unproven and some guys that are very key positions like quarterback, for example. The counter to that, and this is your point, which I love, if I'm going to take a gamble on a younger player, he better be really talented.
Yeah.
Like the skill level better be really good. And that's where what I think makes this class unique is that it's like it's a talented group. You know, we talked about this on the show constantly when this class was being put together, and it was not getting the respect that I felt it deserved. You know, when looking at the national rankings, when you look at where this class ranked at Rivals and where this class ranked at 247, we kept trying to say like, hey guys, I mean, I know what the national services are saying, and I know that they stick to the whole, you know, look how important recruiting rankings are and things like that. And you ever notice they only ever talk about the teams that were ranked high that win. They never talk about the teams that are ranked high that are garbage. That kind of, you know, because there's not one set rule. But I remember looking at this class and I kept saying like, guys, I think people are missing the boat. I'm telling you, there are not 8 classes better in the country than this class was back in 2024. And part of it is because certain guys just weren't getting the same respect. They were 9th on Rivals. They were 9th on 247. And we kept saying, like, this is a better class than this. I don't know that there's 4 or 5 classes that are better. On 3 had him 11th. Well, who's right? That's one of the answers that we're going to find out this year, Trevor, is who was right. Who is right in this discussion of Notre Dame sophomore class? Is it the Notre Dame coaches? Is it us and our valuations? Where if Leonard Moore was ranked appropriately, if Bryce Young was ranked appropriately by some, if CJ Carr was ranked appropriately by On 3, and there's different guys in this class that Micah Gilbert was not very heavily thought of by some people. If we're right on those guys and they were ranked where we had them, then I think Notre Dame's recruiting class goes up. Now, some of the services had some of those guys ranked higher. On 3 was much higher on Anthony Knapp than anybody else. They had him as a top 200 player. I think at one point in time, it was actually Sullivan Absher that was true for. Excuse me. But they had him ranked very high in that class. They had Gerby Lambert as a 5-star player, but most services did not think very highly of him. 247 Sports had him as a 3-star. ESPN has him as a 3-star. Rivals had him as a 3-star. Well, say whatever you want about Anthony Knapp and whether you think he should be a left tackle, right guard, center, whatever. I think we can all agree that he's proven he was not a 3-star player. I think he's proven that. He was not a 3-star player. So that's the question is who was right? And who was right or more right is going to determine the impact this class is going to have. And the impact this class has is going to go a long way towards determining how good this team can be, because I'm going to make this bold statement, Trevor. I don't think Notre Dame can make a run to the championship game if this 2024 class doesn't prove to be as good as we think it should be, or the Notre Dame coaching staff thinks it should be. I don't think if the secondary players, if the receivers, if the running backs, if the offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, and of course a quarterback, if they're not as good as Notre Dame thought they were or that we think they are, then I don't think this team, they have enough to maybe be a playoff team. I don't think they're a team that has a chance to win a championship if they're not as good as what we expect them to be.
I'd agree with that completely. I mean, when you look at Notre Dame's football team, we had a show last week talking about narratives, and what are some of the narratives about this team? Well, some of the narratives that are true about this team, some of them got squashed last year, but some of them are still a little prevalent. Like Notre Dame hasn't had a quarterback that can consistently push the ball down the field. Now, the narrative is so they don't have a difference maker at quarterback, to which I say, please go back and watch all 16 games that 13 played in all last year. But point being, Notre Dame has not had a quarterback under center that has been able to push the ball down the field with much consistency in the last 5 years. And so that remains to be true. Start talking about edge rushers at Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been without a purely dominant edge rusher since Isaiah Foskey left after the 22 season. You start talking about left tackle. Last season, offensive line took a dip. Notre Dame, to me, is still O-line U, but really since the 2020s have started, it's kind of been up and down. 2020, they had a pretty good offensive line. 21, they were terrible. 22, they were like okay in some spots. 23, okay in some spots, and so
it was stretches. 22 early, they weren't very good. 22 late, they were pretty good. 23, there was a couple games where they looked like they were turning around. Other games, you're like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Continue.
And so what we've talked about a lot on the show is Notre Dame has to have a dude at left tackle to make the run that they want to. Well, right now, the presumed starting left tackle is going to be a part of that sophomore class. A guy that we believe can be a difference maker on the edge, rushing the passer, is a part of that sophomore class.
And that sophomore left tackle, who do fans want to play instead of him?
Gerby Lambert.
Who's what?
A sophomore.
A sophomore. Mm-hmm. So, fans want the left tackle to be a sophomore, whether you're an Anthony Knapp guy or a Gerby Lambert guy. They want one of the starting tackles to be a sophomore. That kind of – so the story doesn't change whether Joe Rudolph is right or whether the fans are right about who should be starting opposite Emil Wagner. It's going to be a member of the sophomore class. Please continue, because you're making great points.
Yeah, but so to your overall point is the key positions that Notre Dame needs, the sophomore class kind of holds that in check. You go and you look at the teams that have won the championship before in the past, especially recent history. They've had dominant edge rushers. They've had good offensive line play. Ohio State's offensive line took a turn for the better once they kicked Donovan Jackson out to left tackle. And with the exception of Michigan, which I would argue is the outlier, have all had quarterbacks that can consistently push the ball down the field. Michigan's a little different because they didn't have to. Mm-hmm. But when they needed him to, J.J. McCarthy played well in the postseason. I mean, so the sophomore class is home to a lot of what Notre Dame needs to take that next step. And I think that's what makes this conversation so interesting.
It really is, Trevor. And the thing about it is the sophomore class is going to have to impact every position. Your running back depth chart is good if the sophomore class isn't there. But the sophomore class can make it elite. The depth, not the 1-2 punch. I'm talking about behind the 1-2 guys. Those two studs, it's elite. I'm saying 3, 4, 5, what we brag about with Notre Dame and being different than everybody else is not that it's 1-2. It's that Notre Dame's different 3, 4, 5. I love Jabron Payne, but the reality is he just doesn't have the God-given ability, in my opinion, that Kedron Young has. And I don't know that he has the ability that Aeneas Williams has. I think Jabron, when healthy, might be a touch better than Aeneas as a runner. He's not what Aeneas is as a pass catcher. I mean, you could debate, okay, I think Jabron's every bit as good of a runner than Aeneas, maybe slightly better. We could have that discussion.
Sure. And
there's points you can make back and forth if Jabron is healthy. But Jabron in the pass game is a really good running back, pass catcher, pass blocker. Aeneas is that as well, but Aeneas is a guy that you could literally line up outside and say, you could go run a sluggo against a linebacker in the college football semifinals and then catch a ball that's over your shoulder that wasn't exactly perfectly thrown and make that grab in a big moment. A route you haven't been thrown once all season. And he makes it look, he catches it like he's a receiver. And that to me is the difference, is that class is the difference. We're worried about how's Notre Dame's third down situation going to be without Riley Leonard. Well, there's a 235-pound sophomore running back that's going to have to say about that. The wide receiver room will not be you better hope one of those sophomores steps up as the number 2 behind Malachi Fields. The tight end position, the depth is dependent upon the growth we're going to see this season from Jack Larson. The offensive line is dependent upon the sophomore class. I mean, Anthony Knapp, what's your depth chart at tackle? Who are your 4 offensive tackles? Emil Wagner, Anthony Knapp, Gerby Lambert, Styles Prescott. What are the second group of guys? What is the bottom 3 guys from after Wagner? What do those next 3 guys have in common? They're all in the same class. They're all sophomores. You look at inside. On the defensive side of the ball, you can't be the defensive line you want to be if Bryce Young isn't the player we hope he can be. Mm-hmm. You need Leonard Moore to continue to be the dude he was a year ago. Kingston Viliama-Asa is the difference between this being a really good linebacker room or the best linebacker room in the country, in my opinion. We'll get into that. And then, of course, the same thing is true in the secondary, or at safety. So this sophomore class is touching every single part of this team, which is why we say if they don't play to their potential, then I don't think this team can reach its potential. Does that mean Notre Dame's not a playoff team without the sophomore class? No, it doesn't mean that. Well, the standard at Notre Dame is get back to where you were. The floor of what to me constitutes a good season for Notre Dame in 2025 is getting back to the semifinals. Anything beyond that, it's still, you're moving in the right direction, but it's not the season you should have had. I think you probably underachieved. Most likely, there could always be exceptions, injuries, all these other type of things. But barring a normal season of injuries, I'm sorry, a semifinal run is what's expected of a team with what they have coming back, the schedule they have, and then also what other teams have coming back, which we've talked a lot about. There's no one that can run and hide from the sophomore class. And that's ultimately what we're referring to. And that's why I'm willing to say this football team cannot reach its full potential if your sophomore class doesn't play to its. And when we talk about full potential, I'm referring to their full potential for where they are.
Relative to their point in the career. Yeah.
Correct. It doesn't mean I need Anthony Knapp to play like senior year Anthony Knapp, or Gerby to play like senior year Anthony Knapp, or CJ Carr's got to fast forward his 2 years of development and play like he will in 2027. And Bryce Young's got to be the senior version of himself, or even Leonard Moore. I don't need Leonard Moore to be junior year Leonard Moore. I just need him to be the best version of sophomore Leonard Moore. And that's what we're referring to. Some guys won't quite reach that. Some guys will play beyond that. But on the whole, you're going to see that. I don't need Kedron Young to look like 2027, 2028 Kedron Young. I just need him to be the best version of himself this year. Same with Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams at wide receiver. And that's why we'd say this sophomore class is going to be the group that makes or breaks it. Now, you can say, well, that's true of the seniors and all. I understand all that. But that's true for everybody. Not everybody has the kind of sophomore class that can impact this team the way that this one will. And that's what makes it unique. And the fact that there are still plenty of holes in the older classes. Why are the three players behind Emil Wagner sophomores? Because you didn't recruit the tackle position very well in the years prior. I mean, that's why. Why is the receiver position so dependent upon the sophomore class to provide depth? Because you haven't recruited the receiver position to very well. And if it wasn't for the two portal guys, there'd be even more pressure on the sophomore class. Same with tight end, and same with linebacker to a degree. Same with, but more so in the secondary. You better have those guys. And if Christian Gray or Leonard Moore goes down, who's stepping into the lineup most likely? It's Carson Hobbs or a true freshman. So that's where that impact comes from. So that's kind of setting the stage, Trev, for the entire discussion of the sophomore class. And obviously we're going to get into offense and defense because I want to break down more specifically individual players and what we expect of them this season. But it was important to lay the foundation for people for us to all come to grips with the fact that this sophomore class is I'm actually going to go through and make a note of this. I'm going to look at the depth chart while we're talking because I did post a depth chart a couple weeks ago. And I'm very curious to see if my hunch is right that there's more sophomores in the projected two deep than any other position group. I'm going to go actually count that and see kind of how that is. But the reality is the sophomore class is the class that is a class that has to play to its potential if Notre Dame is going to be to its potential, more so than any other position, because not only are the sophomores that are playing going to be counted on, but if older players are injured or don't step up, it's going to be the sophomore class that has to bail them out. Last year, you were turning to a lot of veterans when there were issues. Your young offensive linemen don't play well, or there's an injured center. Let's turn to senior Rocco Spindler. Let's turn to senior Pat Coogan. There's injuries this year. It's Styles. It's Gerby. It's maybe Peter Jones. It's younger players in a lot of instances. And that's putting a lot of pressure on this class, and we're going to find out if they're up to the challenge.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you touched on it, and I know we're getting ready to jump into individuals here. So before we get there, go ahead.
No, you got it. You got it.
Yeah, before we get there, folks, you guys know what to do. Please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here, you see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen, is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, we're talking sophomore class, and we're going to get a little bit more granular with this conversation. And where we're going to begin is on the offensive side of the ball. Now, we talked about it in the first part of the show of this segment about how important the 2024 recruiting class is. And when you look at it on paper, to me, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but the sophomore class, I think, is naturally just going to carry a little bit more weight on offense this year as opposed to defense.
Yeah.
All will have important roles. Offense and defense will be impacted by the 2024 class differently. But I think the offense, mainly around a handful at like 2 positions, really kind of carry the weight of, okay, the offense is really going to feel this 2024 class.
We talked about big picture. Every aspect of this team is going to be touched by the sophomore class on offense and defense. And I think the special teams is going to have a lot of influence as well. We're going to look at guys like Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak and guys like that. We'll talk about them later. But to your point, when you look at the desired impact, with the exception of Leonard Moore, you don't need any other sophomore to play at an elite level. I'm going to talk about the impact that Bryce Young could have if he was an elite, the impact that Kingston Viliamasa could have, but neither one of those guys have to be studs at their positions for Notre Dame to compete for a championship. I think they can just be good players. I think Notre Dame needs more than just good, solid depth players at more spots on offense than they do on defense. I think you're absolutely correct. And it really starts with, like you said, the important positions. You talk about left tackle, you talk about quarterback, and we're going to kind of dive into each one. But the reality of it is, Trev, is the offense especially is going to need this sophomore class to step up because they're an injury away almost everywhere from a sophomore stepping into the lineup. And you could argue that they are an injury away from a sophomore or redshirt sophomore stepping in everywhere, because that's true of the offensive line when you look like Joe Otting and Sullivan Absher and guys like that. Yeah. But it's even more so like a tackle. If Emil Wagner goes down, you're going to have 2 sophomores in starting. I mean, maybe if it's not, it's what? It's a true freshman. I mean, that's the reality of it. Or, you could say maybe you'll move Jagasol, maybe. But right now, that's where you're at. Wide receiver, Malachi Fields goes down. Who's stepping up? It's Micah Gilbert or it's Cam Williams, maybe both. You look at running back, you're an injury away from those guys being thrust into really prominent roles. And, hey, what do we need from you now? We need you to be Jadarian Price, or we need you to be Jeremiah Love, because those guys are now down. And then, of course, in the starting lineup, you are confidently going to have a true sophomore starting at left tackle or a true sophomore starting at quarterback. There's a question of who will be the starting left tackle from the sophomore class, and maybe there's some debate there. I don't think that there is. But if it's not Anthony Knapp, it's Gerby Lambert or it's Styles Prescott, and most likely Gerby Lambert if it's not Anthony Knapp. But at quarterback, you're certainly going to have a sophomore. And at left tackle, you're going to have a sophomore. Name me 2 more important positions on the offense than at Notre Dame than your quarterback or your left tackle. I'm not saying better. Obviously, Jeremiah Love's your star. But as far as what are the prominent positions that are going to determine overall your success, it's quarterback and left tackle. And those 2 positions are going to be manned by true sophomores this season.
Well, the thing that I love about this conversation is, in their own way, everybody is in need. You need your left tackle and quarterback to step up. You need the depth at wide receiver to step up. You need the depth on the offensive line to step up. And that's what makes this conversation so interesting. To your point about on defense, Leonard Moore needs to continue his ascension as a nationally recognized corner. Outside of that, based on the makeup of the defensive depth chart, it's not a necessity. On offense, it is, and that's what makes this conversation such an interesting one. So let's get specific here, Brian. Let's start working our way down the line here, breaking down the members of this 2024 class. that's getting ready to step up into the limelight. And I think it's fitting the first place that we are going to start is at quarterback, where we start talking about CJ Carr.
You could argue, Trevor, that CJ Carr certainly goes into the season with the most eyes on him of anybody on offense from a questioning standpoint. Jeremiah Love's the star. He's the guy that gets most of the attention, and rightfully so. And there's a lot. But as far as I don't know about that guy. I mean, I saw Bill Bender, someone who I respect greatly at Sporting News, releases his top 25 quarterbacks for college football for the college football season. And he has, he's got, it's sort of a projection, and he's got Bryce Underwood at number 25. He's got Julian Sain at number 10, no CJ Carr. Every time you read a preseason prognostication that sort of tamps down Notre Dame's expectations, it's always about, well, they have a first-year starter quarterback in CJ Carr, and we're not really sure, how he's going to be. You don't often see the same excitement from a national perspective about CJ Carr as you'll read about a Julian Sain, a Dante Moore stepping in starting lineup, who's a third-year player, Bryce Underwood, who's a true freshman. You don't see that same level of excitement nationally for CJ Carr. It's almost as if these people haven't even looked at their own recruiting rankings and looked and seen that, outside of on 3, CJ Carr was ranked pretty highly ranked quarterback coming out of high school. Yeah. What's interesting is a national writer on 3 ranks Notre Dame number 2 coming out of the polls, but hey, that's a different conversation for a different day. But CJ Carr, for everybody other than on 3, was a top 50 recruit. 247 had number 45, ESPN had number 36, and Rivals had number 50. And so there's a lot of pressure on him there's not a lot of excitement about him that I would have expected from the national media. There is, however, from Notre Dame fans. But, I think when I look at this, Trev, CJ Carr is a guy that is going to determine. I think the national media is right in saying, the quarterback, his performance is a big reason for, how Notre Dame is going to be. And the lack of faith in his performance compared to, let's say, a Julian Sain or a Bryce Underwood is partly why Notre Dame's not getting some of the same level of benefit of the doubt that other teams are. There's an assumption that Arch Manning is going to be really good. There's an assumption that Julian Sain is going to produce. There's an assumption that Bryce Underwood is going to do this. There's an assumption that this quarterback, DJ Lagway, in year 2 is going to be this breakout star. There's not that same assumption for CJ Carr, and that's because we've seen CJ Carr throw a grand total of 0 passes in college football. So to a degree, I kind of get it. Now I would say that it's not like Julian Sain was out there lighting the world on fire coming off the bench, last season and throwing 1 million passes for them last year. I mean, he threw 12 passes and completed 5 of them. So, but 5-star recruit, and it's Ohio State. And that was Bill's point in putting Julian Sain 10th in his list. It wasn't that he's gave this evaluation of Julian Sain's skill set, and this is why quarterbacks at Ohio State are going to put up numbers. There's this, and I kind of get that, where Notre Dame hasn't had that, and so there's a lot of pressure on him externally to kind of prove some of the doubters wrong. But take that aside, it's not pressure per se, but there's a need internally for CJ Carr to step into the lineup, and he's stepping into it with some pretty big shoes to fill. I think that adds to the challenge of what's in front of CJ Carr. Is you're not replacing Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner or even Sam Hartman, who had a perceived disappointing season. You're stepping in for a guy that was in a year time actually not even that, in a 5-month time was beloved. I don't think he was super beloved after the second game of the year, but by the end of the year, Notre Dame fans were absolutely in love with Riley Leonard, and the players clearly had a great deal of respect for him because they voted him a team captain, and a guy that, as we talked about yesterday, or you and I talked about last week as well, and have talked about in the past, was a guy that could put a team on his shoulders and say, okay, O-line's not struggling, I got you. Receivers aren't getting open, I got you. They're focused on stopping this guy, Jeremiah Love, okay, I got you. He could put his team on his shoulders, and as I've said before, Riley Leonard was an elevator last season. He didn't always do it in the sexiest ways, but the fact is they were better with him in the lineup when he wasn't in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what CJ Carr is stepping in to replace this season.
That's such a great point, man. For Notre Dame, in really the history of the playoffs, quarterback was looked at almost as a de facto when they did make it to the playoffs. You know, you've brought it up before, but you start thinking about the quarterbacks that Notre Dame had to go up against when they reached the postseason. You know, in 2018, they're going up against Trevor Lawrence. They're going up against Tua. They're going up against the final team is escaping me.
What, 2018?
Oh, mm-hmm.
Is Tua, Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence.
That's
right. Oklahoma, Clemson, Alabama.
You know, in 2020
it was Justin Fields, Mac Jones, and Trevor Lawrence.
And then you start talking about last year. For the first time, Notre Dame had a quarterback that people were talking about saying, hey, Notre Dame is in this game because of.
Yeah.
It wasn't looked at as a disadvantage.
And what else was true last year? There wasn't another great quarterback on any. It was Drew Aller, Will Howard, and Quinn Ewers.
Mm-hmm.
There was no Kyler Murray, no Trevor Lawrence, no Tua Tagovailoa, no Mac Jones. I don't know that that's going to be true moving forward either, Trevor. So it's to me, it's both. It's Riley was that, but also Notre Dame didn't have to face the elite quarterback last year. And even if Carson Beck plays, they're not facing that elite quarterback. They had to beat Curtis Rourke, Gunnar Stockton, Drew Aller, and Will Howard to win a championship last year.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in 2018, they had to beat Trevor Lawrence in the first round, and then the winner of the Kyler Murray Tua Tagovailoa matchup in the second round.
Yeah.
A little bit of a different deal. What's your reward for beating Alabama and Mac Jones in 2020? Welcome to Columbus, Ohio, home of Justin Fields and the Ohio State Buckeyes. It's a little bit of a different deal.
No, sure is. And CJ Carr has the opportunity to continue what Riley Leonard laid the foundation for. Of, hey, the quarterback position at Notre Dame needs to be looked at with a little bit of a different light. Now, with that being said, this goes back to what we said in the first part of this segment of CJ Carr doesn't have to play like 2027 CJ Carr. Yes, play like 2025 CJ Carr, which is still a really good football player. The way that Notre Dame's team is made up on offense with Malachi Fields and Greathouse and Raridan and Pauling and Love and Price and Williams and Young, he doesn't have to have a Joe Burrow season. He doesn't have to have a Mac Jones season. He just has to steer the ship. But there, like we've talked about, there will come a moment or moments throughout the season where it's like, hey, look, Jeremiah Love got us this far. Jadarian Price got us this far. The O-line got us this far. Hey, 13, we need you to go out there and we need you to be a playmaker for this quarter, for this drive, for this series. And at some point, that will come to fruition. Whether it's in week 1 or week 16, it's going to happen somewhere in between there. And that's why it's so important that he steps up. This makes this sophomore class conversation really, really exciting.
When you look at CJ Carr, Trev, let's start putting some. We've talked a lot about, we've danced around some numbers and some things like that. And what does it look like for CJ Carr to play at a level that is allowing Notre Dame to win a championship? What does that look like? Let's get real about it. And the first thing that I look at is he has to be a mature beyond his years from a pressure and a protecting the football standpoint. That can mean one of two things, because here's what often gets talked about when you talk about a young player and turnovers. It's not just that a young player can commit a lot of turnovers. That's obvious. There's also the counter to that, which is a lot of young players are so afraid of turning the ball over that they become unnecessarily conservative, which limits their ability to then go make plays. Both of those things are risks for CJ Carr and any young quarterback that's going to step into the lineup this year. It's true for Dante Moore at Oregon as a redshirt sophomore. It's true for CJ Carr, Julian Sand as a redshirt freshman at Ohio State. It's true for DJ Lagway as a sophomore. It's going to be true for a lot of young quarterbacks stepping into the spotlight this season, which is, yes, you have to protect the football and not turn it over a ton, but you also can't be so afraid to make a mistake that you make a mistake by trying not to make a mistake. Meaning there was a guy open on 3rd and 5, but you weren't willing to throw the football, and so now we're punting. So no, you didn't throw an interception, but you also still made a mistake that killed the drive. So, yeah, that's a throw you need to make. And so those are things that he's going to have to learn, in my opinion, as it comes down to taking that next level. So that's point number one. Point number two is we do need to see CJ Carr be a playmaker at times this season. We do need to see production. We talked about numbers, and there was a post last week that said, would you be happy if CJ Carr went out this season and rushed for or threw for 2,800 yards and rushed for 350 yards? And my response was, well, how many games are we talking about? Are we talking about 12-game season? Are we talking about a 16-game season? Because 2,800 yards in the regular season is actually about where I expect CJ Carr to be this season, or at least the pass game as a whole. But, you think he's going to get a lot of that. I do expect the offense to pass for at least 230 yards this season. And if CJ Carr averages 230 yards a game, and then you're looking at in the regular season, that's 2,760 yards. You play one postseason game and you're past that. I mean, Riley Leonard this past season averaged 178.8 yards. Now, that's a little bit misleading because he had a game against Purdue where he passed for 100 yards. Oh, it's because he didn't play a snap of the second half. I mean, he had 100 yards rushing and 100 yards passing. There will be games where CJ Carr won't throw for a bunch of yards because they're blowing somebody out. But, you look at the year before, Sam Hartman averaged 224 passing yards per game. That's not a very good number. And you're like, well, Sam Hartman couldn't pass for that many yards. What are we expecting from CJ Carr? Well, I don't think Notre Dame's going to have a whole lot of 8 for 14 performances for 140 yards like he had last year. And I would also argue that CJ Carr has a better offensive coordinator, and he's in a better situation in that regard. Year before that, your Notre Dame offense averaged 207.1 passing yards per game. Not since Jack Cohn in 2021 has Notre Dame had a quarterback pass for over 230 yards in a game. And then before that, you have to go back again several seasons because, to get to where, you're talking about a guy that threw for 3,000 yards, because Ian Book didn't throw for 3,000 yards in 2020 in a 12-game stretch. He threw for about 2,830 yards. We haven't seen Notre Dame with a, other than Jack Cohn, a 3,000-yard passer since Ian Book in 2019. And then prior to that, we hadn't seen a 3,000-yard passer quarterback since what? Tommy Rees in 2013? Because Ian Book's only 3,000-yard season, and he only threw for 3,034 was in 2019. Now, part of that is you had a change at quarterback 4 games into the 2018 season, and had Ian Book played all of 2018 and produced at the level he did on a per-game basis all of 2018, he goes way past 300 yards. And this is something that I look at is that season was very interesting because I would argue that the best stretch of passing football that we've seen at Notre Dame since Jimmy Clausen in 2009 was Ian Book in 2018.
Agreed.
And a lot of people are going to say, well, dude, hold on a second. You're always banging on Ian Book. But what do I always say about Ian Book? Ian Book's best year was 2018. And if he would have played his whole career like he did in 2018, he's a very different quarterback. So my question is, can CJ Carr not look anything like the what we saw from Ian Book as a redshirt sophomore in 2018? Because in 2017, Ian Book had a spot start against North Carolina where he didn't play very well. Other than that, everything he did was mop-up duty until the bowl game against LSU. He did pretty well there. So he obviously had a lot more experience than CJ Carr did. But I keep trying to remind people, like, do y'all remember how good Ian Book was in 2018? I mean, he started, 10 games that year? See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 games. Started 9 games that year. In 9 games, including the playoff game, Ian Book averaged 290.6 passing yards per game in 9 starts that season. I'm only asking CJ Carr to throw for 230, minimum 230. Yeah. But I do think a minimum of 230 is where the expectation for me is. Knowing what the offense is, knowing the kind of weapons that they have, and knowing that they're going to need that to take some of the pressure off of the run game, because every team they play, until proven otherwise, is going to say, we got to stop 4 and we got to stop 24. If we're going to get beat by Notre Dame, we're going to make 13 beat us. Now, 13 beat them last year, but it's a different 13 now. But I mean, if you're the coaches at Miami and Texas A&M, you're telling me that they're not going to sit there and say, dude, we're not going to get beat again by Jeremiah Love. We're not going to get beat by Jadarian Price. We're going to make 13 beat us. And I think that's going to require CJ Carr to step up and prove that he can beat you with throwing the football. So from a yardage standpoint, I do think 230 is sort of that number that I'm looking at, Trev. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. And the Texas A&M game is going to be one that I'm going to be looking at real closely when you talk about that conversation. If you can't let 4 and 24 beat us, I mean, Texas A&M is going to be facing a Notre Dame team very similar to what they faced down in College Station week 1 this past year. 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen, 4, 24, Greathouse, Faison. It's the majority of the offensive lineup. I'm willing to bet that Mike Elko, being the defensive mind that he is, I would assume that that is absolutely his mindset. Absolutely his mindset. And so we're going to have the opportunity early to see what this is going to look like for CJ Carr. Not saying that, hey, guys, be on the lookout. CJ Carr is probably throwing for 300 yards against Texas A&M.
Right. Be nice.
Right. Would I be upset? No. But the cool thing about this conversation is, would I be overall shocked if CJ Carr had a performance against Texas A&M like what Ian Book had against like Syracuse in 2018? Also, no. Would I be surprised if he had a similar performance against Texas A&M at home at night, like what Ian Book had in 2018 against Stanford at home at night? No, I wouldn't, because that's not beyond the realm of his capabilities. I do believe that early on in the season, that's beyond the realm of what they will ask him to do, but it's possible, and that's what's exciting.
And here's the thing, Trevor, it's, you can say that all you want, and I can agree wholeheartedly with you that, look, they're not going to ask him to put the team on their shoulders and do, but what if they're forced to? What if they're forced? Let's say the offensive line is good but not great, or let's say, here's another kind of way of looking at it. Let's just say maybe you get into a situation where the other team is just like, dude, we're going to load the box. And as I've said plenty of times, if you're good enough, you can shut down another team's run game. I don't care how good it is. If you're good enough as a team, you can slow that down. I mean, Georgia basically came out in 2017 and said, we're not going to let Notre Dame run the ball on us. They're going to have to beat us throwing the football. And they were able to put enough numbers. They had enough talent in the front seven that they could shut Notre Dame's run game down. And the reason Notre Dame lost that game is because they couldn't hit the big plays in the throwing game. Some of it was on the quarterback. Some of that was on the receivers. I still think if Freddie Canteen trying to backpedal to catch a deep ball that I thought was a good throw, that a good receiver would have made. I remember Chris Fink having a ball hit off his chest in that game. Now, Chris Fink went on to make some big-time plays at Notre Dame. I'm not banging on Chris Fink, but in that game, he had a chance to make a big play on third down, didn't make it. And then there's plenty of opportunities where Brandon Wimbush didn't hit an open receiver or do a bad ball or made a mistake. And there's always been – there's going to be enough teams. And I think Miami's a team that if they want to, early in the game, they can say, you're not going to run the ball on us. And you know the last time Miami did that, last time Notre Dame played, that's exactly what Miami did in 2017. They said, look, you're not going to beat us with Josh Adams and Dexter Wimp. You're just not. You're going to have to beat us throwing the football. And Notre Dame wasn't able to do that. Now, I still say if Equanimous catches that pass in the end zone on that first drive, we're having a different conversation. Yeah. But he didn't. And they didn't, because I have to go back and watch the play, but it wasn't a very good ball, if I remember correctly. But that's the reality of it. Good teams, and Notre Dame plays good teams first two games, can say, look, we're not going to let the run game beat us. You're going to have to throw the football. Now, it doesn't mean that if he doesn't throw for 330, they're going to lose. It means he's going to have to make some plays to move the offense. And so I do think we're going to find out very early on, how does Mike Denbrock handle an offense that has a talented redshirt freshman quarterback going against very good defenses who are going to be geared towards stopping everyone but him? And that's going to be a big key. Other things that I need to see from CJ Carr this year, is, obviously production wise, you want to see him over 65, at least 65% completions. You want to see them well over 8 yards per attempt and things along those lines. But the two things are going to determine CJ Carr's success this season for me. There's two aspects of it beyond the obvious. Don't throw into triple coverage and get picked off. Don't just throw off your back foot and just launch a ball that you don't see. Those type of things, but it's going to be about can he lead an offense that's better throwing the ball down the field. And I'm not someone who's a believer that you got to throw the ball 30 times a game beyond 15 yards. I'm not, but you have to have the ability to attack teams down the field. That's throwing the ball on the outside, throwing the ball over the top, but that also means that 15 to 25 region in between the hashes that Notre Dame has not been great at attacking in recent seasons. And he's going to have to be a part of an offense that's better there. It's not all on him. You're going to have better weapons there. But the other part of it to me, Trevor, is CJ Carr is going to have to lead an offense that, simply put, is just more capable of going out and making big plays on third down in the throwing game. I don't know that you're going to be able to rely on Riley Leonard all the time, but here's the other part of it is there was a lot of situations last year in third and short. We can talk about third and short all we want. Notre Dame was pretty good in third and short because they don't have Riley Leonard anymore. But let's not forget the fact that overall, third down, Notre Dame was not a very good team last year on third down. They were 61st in the country on third down last year. They were 41.3% on third down last year. That is not good. That is not good at all. Why did they beat Penn State? They went 11 of 17 on third down. Why did they go 11 and 17 on third down? Because that was the one game last year that Riley Leonard was a beast on third down with his arm.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And then there was other games where they were terrible on third down. They went 1 of 12 against Virginia on third down. Like, that's just not going to get it done. Against Indiana, they went 7 of 13 on third down. Why? Because he was hitting throws. He was getting the ball out. He was getting where he needed to go, not just on third down, but some second down throws. Instead of it 2nd and 10 or 2nd and 12, it's 2nd and 2 or instead of 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, it's 2nd and 2 because he was, avoiding pressure, getting the ball off. And then against Georgia, a game where the offense sputtered, they went 4 of 14 on third down. And Notre Dame went 5 of 12 on third down against Ohio State, which is actually not a terrible number against a team like Ohio State. But all of that came in the first drive and when they were down 31-7. In between those two drives, they were terrible on third down, which is partly why Ohio State went up 31-7. So, and there's a lot of reasons for it. Sometimes there's the O-line, but he has to be part of an operation that is much better on third down. Means he has to be better on first and second down, throwing the ball. And then also when you get in those third down situations, he's got to be able to, sometimes it's just simply read the defense and get the ball to your guy. Sometimes it's you got to make a play. Because, the 3rd and 9 to Jaden Greathouse, that was Jaden Greathouse making a play, but Riley giving him a chance to make a play. But there's a couple other third downs in that game where it was Riley getting out of the pocket. They come at him and he throws the ball behind him. I'm not asking CJ Carr to do that all the time, but there's going to be times where it's like, dude, I just need you to make this money comeback throw to the sideline that's going to low and away that you let Malachi Fields go down and get it. I need you to throw the ball up and give Eli Raritan a shot on that play. No, nobody's open, but you got to give somebody a chance to go make a play. What's your outlet throw if everybody's open? Riley Leonard's outlet was, I'm going to run. CJ will have his moments where he'll scramble and move the chains, but what's your outlet for being good on third down? To me, those two things are going to determine how good CJ Carr is going to be this season. He'll be good in RPO. He'll be great in a quick game. He'll have a screen throws and all that. But can he effectively attack teams down the field? And can he be good on third down? Those are the areas where that'll determine just how good CJ Carr is and how impactful he's going to be on this offense. Because what do you do? What happens every time you get a third down conversion? More chances for you to find ways to get the ball to 4 and 24.
The only component that I'll add to that I'll be keeping an eye out for is what is his resolve going to be when he does make a mistake? Because Riley Leonard was fantastic, especially towards the tail end of last season. I mean, go watch the Penn State game for a review of when he makes a mistake, it would not compound. It wouldn't weigh on them the rest of the game. We've seen Notre Dame quarterbacks in the past. If they just don't have it that day and they just start to make more mistakes and more mistakes and more mistakes, happened in the 2017 Miami game. Quarterback started out rough, and then the mistakes started to compound. So what will CJ Carr be able to do when he inevitably does throw an interception? It's going to happen. And so is it flush it, quick memory, let's get back out onto the field? Does that make you hungrier to get back out onto the field? Or is it one of those where it's, you hang your head and you keep talking about it on the sideline, then you go up to the receiver, it's like, hey, my bad, dude. And, flush it, move on, because that is one of the very few things. You can replicate it to a degree in practice, but you're never going to be able to feel the weight of it until it happens in a game. And that is going to be the final component for me to evaluate how CJ Carr is this season.
I'll add a little bit to that, Trevor, before we move on to Anthony Knapp. It's not even just about the turnovers. What if he starts a game 1 of 5 and he's just not feeling it? He's off target. He's like, it's kind of like a pitcher. Now, the mechanics of throwing a football and pitching and being a pitcher in baseball are vastly different, but the mindset is similar. Sometimes you come out in that first inning, and Trev, I pitched in high school. I'm sure you pitched in high school. Sometimes I'd come in that first inning, and I'm not feeling it. I am all over the place. My arm's tight. I can't put the ball where I want it. You got to kind of go regroup in that second inning and be like, all right, okay, let me figure it out. And then you got to regroup, and then the true guys are the ones that can go out there and say, okay, look, I'm just not feeling it today, but I got to overcome that and be a bulldog and get in there and get this thing done. Mm-hmm. There are going to be games where CJ Carr just isn't seeing the defense as well as you want him to. He's a little off. Maybe he's a little rushed. Can he and this is the same attitude that leads to him shaking off turnovers. It's also sometimes about, dude, I missed 2 open guys on that last series. Does he beat himself up? Does he put his head down? Does he get mad? And that leads him to start forcing balls. That leads to more mistakes. Or does he shake it off and say, dude, we're fine. That's on me. Now let's go out there and make those plays. That's a lot of times what separates the great ones from the others. I mean, there's been plenty of games, and growing up a Broncos fan, where the Broncos are trailing and Elway's having a really rough game, but you better not give him the ball in a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, because you're going to be in trouble. Yeah. And that's the one thing that I give Ian Book credit for is he there were games where he just was terrible and they got blown out. But if there was games he was bad. And my argument to people is like, well, look at the great fourth quarter drive he had against. So I'm like, well, he was part of the reason that they were down in the fourth quarter. And so it's a point to, like, I think sometimes we overinflate this, and this, but he still had to make those plays in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
He still had to make that post throw to Miles Boykin on 4th down against Pitt. Yes, he was the reason they were losing to Pitt 14-13 or 14-12 or whatever it was. But hey, so what? What are you going to do now? And he steps up and makes those plays. And he was kind of good the whole fourth quarter of that game. He was a big reason with his 2 red zone turnovers against Virginia Tech why they were down 21-4 or 20-14 in that game. Okay, so what? Can't do anything about that. You can go lead him on this fourth quarter drive right now. And He did that. I think of Deshaun Kaiser against Temple in 2015. He was terrible against Temple. 2 red zone interceptions. He was a big reason they were down, was it? I think 21-17, something like that in the fourth quarter. But in that last drive, he makes a great read, hits Alize Mack on a corner route. They ran smash, Mack's open, he hits him, and then he makes the great throw to Will Fuller to win it. I don't care what you did the first 3.5 quarters. You got to shake that off and go out there and make a play. Not all quarterbacks can do that. Yeah. The best ones do, and the best ones do it consistently. That's the mindset that leads to what you're talking about, Trev, which is, can he do that? And we don't know the answer to that because we haven't seen him in that situation. Now, he did that at times in high school, but that's high school football. This isn't high school football. And those are the big keys. Another example, Ballpeen Shillelagh. Ian Book was great in the first half against Clemson. He was garbage in the third quarter and part of the fourth quarter against Clemson. He's part of the reason Clemson came back in that game. Mm-hmm. But what did he do in the fourth quarter when Clemson took the lead? He made 2 huge throws. We all remember the post route to Avery Davis, but you forget the scramble play where he had to hit Avery between 2 guys in the end zone for the touchdown. So does he have that in him? As much as I think Ian Book was an overrated quarterback, I can't take that away from him. That takes something. Now, I've always said, why can't he play like that more often? like it's almost like you want to spot the other team 14 points and say, okay, Ian, we're down 14. Let it loose. Just let her rip. Is CJ Carr that, or is he a guy that can be that way kind of all the time? That's going to separate him from, being a good quarterback at Notre Dame. Ian Book was a good quarterback at Notre Dame. He just wasn't the great player some people make him out to be, but he was a winner. Or is he the guy that they win all the time and he doesn't have to do that all the time because he gets out of that funk in the second quarter and he doesn't wait till the fourth quarter to do that?
Yeah.
And those are things that are going to separate him from other great players. Another guy, Trev, that's hugely important to this team is Anthony Knapp. And we can debate all summer whether or not Joe Rudolph should or shouldn't have the love fest he has for Anthony Knapp. It's irrelevant. The reality is he does. And even if you look at it from the standpoint of if we're right about Anthony Knapp and Joe Rudolph is wrong, what have we always said? He should be starting somewhere. I have no problem with his projected starting five. I have a problem with where Anthony Knapp is going to play in that starting five. The reality is Anthony Knapp is going to be very important to your season in 2025. What if they say, you know what, Derby Lambert beat out Anthony Knapp. He's going to go out there and be your starting left tackle. Well, what if he gets hurt in the first game like we've seen happen before? Blake Fisher in 2021 got hurt in the first game of the year. We saw Charles Jagasaw last year get hurt in camp. However you spin it, Notre Dame's going to need Anthony Knapp to be a good football player this year. How much growth he makes from year one to year two is going to have a big say on how good this football team is going to be this season, because I believe that the offensive line is going to play a huge role. I'm going to bring up a graphic here, Trev, that I put on the message board last week, and it's going to show you what kind of jump he needs to make that we have seen from past Notre Dame players. So this is Pro Football Focus data. And if you look at Anthony Knapp's numbers as a freshman, snaps, overall PFF grade, pass game grade, sacks allowed, hits on the quarterback, hurries, and total pressures. That's what that line means. Now, we've got a 3 or 4 page thread that we've been debating this on the message board since I put it up. I think it was Friday. I think is when I put it up. Thursday,
yeah,
Friday.
That sounds right.
So you say, well, Anthony Knapp was bad last year. He was. But if you look at his actual numbers and you compare them to Robert Hainsey's numbers in 2017, like, well, Hainsey gave up 14 fewer pressures and 12 total. Well, he also played 184 fewer snaps. I did the numbers, Trev, and if you project Robert Hainsey's pressure numbers that year out to playing 425 snaps, he would have allowed 30 total pressures. So that's one fewer than Anthony Knapp, but he would have allowed more sacks because he gave up the same number of sacks as Anthony Knapp did last year in fewer games. And then you look at the jump Robert Hainsey made in year 2. And he played 63 more snaps than what Anthony Knapp played. And he dropped his number. So if you project Hainsey's numbers, I think it was 7 sacks. It was like 2 hits on the quarterback. No, 6 sacks, like 2 hits on the quarterback. And then something like 22 pressures or something like that. It was 30 total pressures. And that was on 425 snaps. A year later, as a true sophomore, he has 64 more snaps, but he allows what would have been 18 fewer pressures and 6 or 7 fewer sacks and fewer hits on the quarterback. Huge jump from year 1 to year 2 as a starter. You look at Liam, and that was as a true freshman to true sophomore. A guy who was about 290 when he played as a true freshman in 2017. Yeah. So very similar player to Anthony Knapp. Then you look at Liam Eichenberg in his first year as a starter, which was his redshirt sophomore year. So he was a year older, but he had far less experience in his first 2 years. He didn't play any snaps in 2016. 2017, he just played mop-up minutes. He was a better player than Anthony Knapp was in his first year as a starter. Significantly better player than Anthony Knapp was. But that's because he was also 2 years older than what Anthony Knapp was. But the point I'm making in comparing him to Liam Eichenberg is look at the jump Liam Eichenberg made from year 1 to year 2 as a starter. Now, there's some exceptions to the rule and guys like Mike McGlinchey and guys like Joe Alt, but those are top 10 draft picks. Of course, they're going to look better. They were also, Mike McGlinchey was also older. But even Joe Alt showed improvement from year 1 to year 2 in playing fewer, more snaps. So the expectation should be that Knapp is going to get better. The question is how much better. And that's really the conversation where I think we as a fan base missed the boat on Anthony Knapp is we, in an attempt to bang on Joe Rudolph, we just assumed that Anthony Knapp's going to be the same exact player he was a year ago. And I think that's a mistake. What some of his defenders will then say, well, look at Robert Hainsey. And I'm like, well, fair point, and I'll use that, but he's got to actually do that. He's got to actually step up to that. But Robert Hainsey is also a right tackle, not your left tackle. That's also part of it. But he's going to have to make he's going to have to make a Robert Hainsey, Liam Eichenberg, year 2 starting kind of jump if this offense is going to reach its full potential. I think he's capable of it if Joe Rudolph is right about Anthony Knapp having sort of the demeanor and the mindset to play tackle, because not everybody does. No, I mean, he doesn't have a length problem. He doesn't have an athleticism problem. He has he's not comfortable in space problem, and he's got a youth problem. If those are both correctable, the youth problem is correctable. But if the space thing is correctable as well, then, I broke down a lot of film on him this past week, putting this list together. I'm going to have a film breakdown. There's just a lot of times he doesn't understand angles. He oversets and guys easily beat him inside. He undersets and guys just bull him into the court. I mean, he just doesn't look comfortable in space. That could mean he just doesn't have it, or it was a youth thing. Either way, however it was, if he can show greater comfort in space, he's going to be you're older, you're stronger. He's seen all those moves now. If he can make a Robert Hainsey, Liam Eichenberg type jump. So again, I'm not asking him to be Joe Alt. I'm not asking him to be Mike McGlinchey. I'm not asking him to be Ronnie Stanley. I'm not asking him to be Zach Martin. I'm not asking him to play like first-round draft picks. I'm talking about a late third-round pick and a second-round pick that got moved to center. That's what I'm asking him to do. If he can make that kind of jump, it's going to have a huge impact on the season. And on the flip side, Trev, if he doesn't make that kind of jump and Joe Rudolph is not willing to move on from him, it's going to be problematic for this football team. But I will. That's why I look at Anthony Knapp and say his ability to make that year 2 jump is going to be every bit as important to this team as any other player outside of CJ Carr, because he could determine, are they a good offensive line or an elite offensive line? I think that could come down to the jump that Anthony Knapp makes in year 2.
And it's a necessity. Anthony Knapp can't play the same, and I'm not saying that I expect him to. We have both said very adamantly on this that it's unrealistic, really unrealistic, that Anthony Knapp is the same player that he was against Stanford in 2024. He's a year older. He has more experience. He started 3 playoff games, wasn't able to finish one of them because of an injury.
He wasn't that player again after that.
Yeah. And so you have to make sure that, to your point, you look at Anthony Knapp with a little bit of context. I don't fall into the camp of he just is who he is. And honestly, if you go and look at some of the good things he did last season, who he is a really good football player for Notre Dame.
Potentially,
but I'm also
really good, yeah.
But I'm also not in the camp of he doesn't have to do anything wrong because he started 15 games and Notre Dame won 14-1. In the same light of Anthony Knapp is not the reason that they lost to Northern Illinois, I don't think Anthony Knapp is also the sole reason they beat Georgia. Mm-hmm. And so he has to be able to improve, and especially with a different skill set at quarterback. We talked about CJ Carr and what is his resolve going to be, and how Riley Leonard was able to, receivers don't have it today? All right, I'll just go run. Offensive line struggle in pass protecting, I'll just break 3 potential sacks and scramble for a first down. You might have a quarterback under center that won't be able to do it to that high of a degree of what Riley Leonard did. And so for all those reasons, the entire offensive line specifically has to get better in pass protection. But Anthony Knapp at left tackle absolutely has to do a better job protecting the blind side of his quarterback this upcoming season. And so he is one of the players on this list between offense and defense that it's a necessity for me. It's not man, it sure would be nice if he just started playing like an All-American left tackle. And my expectation for him isn't to be a first-round draft pick in 2025. But you got to take the step to get there.
Right.
You have to take the step to being a 4.5-star upside player. Because if you are any shade of what you were in 2024, it's going to result in more sacks.
Right.
So
And more
that's
stagnation of the offense because you don't have that running ability of Riley Leonard to bail you out of trouble. You don't. So what are the expectations for Anthony Knapp in 2025? If Anthony Knapp makes the kind of jump that's needed and expected, what does it look like? Well, reason number one is build on your strength. And as we've talked about, Trevor, there were long stretches of the season last year where Anthony Knapp was arguably your best run blocker. I think that he was. There's others that would debate that it was this guy or that guy, and that's fine. I'm not going to like argue with you about it. I have my opinion, and I can see why some people have said, "Hey, look, in November it was Rocco Spindler, and he was their best run blocker." All right, we can agree to disagree. I think Rocco was very good. That's why I'm not going to argue with you about it. It's not that I don't think Anthony Knapp was good. It's just I think Rocco's pretty good. I thought Emil had some moments in the postseason where he was pretty good in the run game. He had some blocks against Georgia where he was punishing people for Georgia. And he had some rougher moments at times too. But, then against Penn State second half, it's like, okay, it's Charles Jagusah in the run game. But if you look at more often than not, it was Anthony Knapp who I thought was their best run blocker. Well, now you're a year older, you're stronger, you're playing that position again. Continue to be that. And we talked about this. Was it Sean and I yesterday, or was it with you and I last week? I think it was yesterday. We have not seen a single snap of football at Notre Dame where Anthony Knapp and Charles Jagusah were on the field at the same time. That's your two most gifted run blockers right there. Not one snap, because Jagusah did not play until the Georgia game, correct? I mean, he wasn't even cleared I don't think he was cleared to play against Indiana, if I remember correctly. He wasn't cleared to play until the Georgia game, if I remember correctly. And so you look at kind of when he stepped on the field, it was when did Charles Jagusah step on the field for the first time last season? It was the Penn State game, and it was when Rocco Spindler got hurt. Well, Knapp had already been knocked out at that point in time. He was already out of the game. Tosh Baker had already replaced him. I think it was a drive or two before he got knocked out. He never returned. So we've never seen those two guys together. You want to talk about part of the reason I'm excited about the run game this year is if we can get Anthony Knapp just makes some in run game, Trev, it's just normal freshman to sophomore moderate improvement. That's all I need in the run game. Yep. And that comes down to more assignment correctness and playing with a little better angles. That's it. If you get that and Charles Jagusah in the lineup at the same time with Billy Schrouth next to him and Ashton Craig coming back, who was a pretty good run blocker before he got injured, you're going to have a pretty darn good run blocking offensive line.
Yeah.
Where so that's expectation number one. The jump, however, that's got to be beyond normal freshman to sophomore jumps is in pass pro. Now, the reason that I point to, I pointed to Robert Hainsey and Liam Eichenberg, but Blake Fisher regressed in pass pro in his second year. At best, he was the same in his second year as a starter, which was 2023, which compared to 2022, because I don't really count his first year as a returning starter because he started the opener, got knocked out halfway, and then played the last game of the year. That's it. I'm talking about first full year as a starter, 2022. He was not any better in 2023, and in some ways, I think he was worse because I think he was more inconsistent in 2023. So not everybody gets better, and I think moderate improvement is not good enough for him to stay at left tackle or to be a good enough left tackle for Notre Dame to have the kind of offense it needs. They need him to make a Robert Hainsey type of jump in year two. Now, the question is, can Joe Rudolph get that out of him? A guy that, in my opinion, doesn't have a strong track record of developing elite pass blocking offensive lines. That's my concern. But if my concerns are proven to be unwarranted or invalid, and he does get the job done, that is a key ingredient to this football team. Because to your point from earlier, your quarterback can't be his full potential, can't play at his full potential if your left tackle doesn't make that type of big jump. If we see a Liam Eichenberg year two jump, a Robert Hainsey year two type jump from Anthony Knapp, this offense skyrockets, in my opinion, because now your weapons in the pass game get activated and your run game remains the same, because you're not talking about a guy like a Tosh Baker where the hope was that Tosh could use his length to just be steady in pass pro and you're accepting the fact that he's not a dominant run blocker. With Anthony Knapp, dude, he's a dominant run blocker. I need you to be good in the pass game and not be the liability that you were for big chunks of the 2024 season. If he can improve there, Trev, he's going to be a very important part to a very good offensive line.
Absolutely. He absolutely holds the key. And, like we've said all offseason, his improvement will dictate how far this offense is going to go. That's for sure. Next set of players we're going to talk about it as a duo, and it's in the running back room. And we're going to have a discussion around Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, both rising sophomores on this. Now, obviously, Aeneas played more minutes and more snaps in bigger games than what Kedron did, but they're each going to have their role on this team this fall. I want to get your thoughts on this, Bryan, because it's tough to say, it's a need for this offense to have these two running backs step up because they have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. So when you start talking about the duo of Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, the rest of these guys we're going to talk about are kind of, they're securing your depth chart in a lot of ways. And so when I look at Aeneas and Kedron Young, it really comes down to, it's a twofold conversation. Number one is present. That's the one we'll focus on. And then number two is future-wise. But if Notre Dame's trying to play for a championship and they're trying to play 16 games this season, I don't think you want Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price taking 95 to 100% of the snaps in games. If there's ways you can steal some snaps for Jeremiah Love, then I think that helps him. Now, the counter is like, okay, I want Jeremiah Love on the field at times on third down. I do. And there's times I don't like the fact that you're a mediocre to below average third down team, and in the vast majority of your third downs, he's not even on the field. And when he has been, he's lead blocking. Like, I don't love that. I don't love that at all. One of the breakdowns I'm going to do that I'm working on now, and I'm working my way through the season, and once I get through it all, I'm going to just put out a ton of stuff. But one of the things I'm going to look at is how many touches did Jeremiah Love get on third down? And it's not as many as you'd expect, run game or pass game. So I do want to see him on third down more, but I don't need him to be the third down back every single time, especially since Aeneas is really good at that role. And then Kedron Young is just a guy that's got to play because he adds something that you just don't have. I've always been a big fan of complementary football players, guys that kind of bring a little something to the table. And in some ways, Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love are complements to each other. Jeremiah is an inside zone duo guy, and especially he's great in inside zone. Jadarian is more of a duo counter guy. He's more of a read and bounce and read the second level and bounce it and cut it back and that type of thing. Or Jeremiah has that ability to just kind of he sees that crease and he's going to exploit it. I think every big run he had last year was pretty much just kind of getting through the line. Now, they were great runs in that he got through great creases and the timing of it was good and he had to accelerate and there's those type of things. But, he doesn't have a ton of those runs where he's making that guy miss in the backfield just because of the nature of what he's going to do. I think one exception would maybe be the counter touchdown run he had against Purdue was a bounce where he had to kind of make a move and bounce outside. That's not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying that's what he did, where a lot of Jadarian's long runs were getting through the line and then having to bounce somewhere. Just different. That's a good thing. This isn't a praise of one guy and a critique of another. They're complementary in those type of ways. But even beyond that, I like the idea of having complementary players in that we have a very different skill set that we bring to the table. Lou Samoja used to talk about one thing that Lou Holtz did back in, I think, especially 1990. I know he did it in 1989, but it was especially true in 1990. And I'm going to pull up the numbers here to back this up. But he would go into games because they had a really good running back room in 1990. If you look at Notre Dame's running back room in 1990, he actually did it also in 1989. But in 1989 and 1990, Notre Dame's running back room was absolutely loaded. They had obviously Tony Rice carried the ball a lot in 89. Rick Meyer carried the ball a decent amount in 1990. But you had Ricky Waters at running back. You had Anthony Johnson at running back and Rodney Culver at running back, all who were NFL draft picks. And in 1989, Dorsey Levens carried the ball 25 times before he transferred to Georgia Tech. That's how loaded they were at running back. Then in 1990, you had Rodney Culver still. You had Ricky Waters. You had Tony Brooks. And then you had this freshman by the name of, I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but they had a freshman running back named Jerome Bettis that year in 1990. I'm not sure if you've heard of him or not. Pretty decent player back in the day. But in those 2 seasons, Rocket had 64 and 67 carries. Well, all those backs were kind of like, they were kind of hammers. And so what Lou would do is in the fourth quarter, when they had kind of leaned on you all game, or, you were wearing down, he would see that and he'd put Rocket in the game, and they'd run toss or draw or something like that. And he'd put him at running back and hand the ball off. And then you're taking a fast guy to a team that's just worn down, and he's going to look like he runs a 4-1 at that point in time. Well, I think Kedron can kind of be the opposite of that for Notre Dame in 2025, where you've got to chase these burners all the time. And you're constantly worried about Jeremiah Love jumping over you or running around you. And you're constantly afraid of Aeneas making a move. Aeneas can too, but you're constantly worried about Jadarian making you miss in space. You're a linebacker in the hole, and you're like, 24 is going to, come at me and then make this cut like he did against Georgia Tech, and he did against Texas A&M, and he did against, Purdue, and he did against Florida State, and making me look like USC and look like a fool. So you come out and you're like, okay, here I am. I'm going to make. And then you put in Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, who's 235 and has great feet, but his best attribute is if you're sitting there in the hole, he's just going to run you over. Like, that is a weapon that adds a very unique element to this run game that just makes it harder to defend this team. And having that kind of weapon in those games in the postseason where they're like, hey, we're gonna crowd the box and we're going to try to shut you down. You have a guy like Kedron Young that you can utilize in certain ways. And then maybe that's a game where you say, okay, we're going to put Kedron in the backfield, and we're going to put Jeremiah in a 20 or 21 personnel group. And we're going to get Jeremiah the ball doing some jets, reverse, screen game, slot fade, crossers, overs, because you're so focused on this. And then if you say, hey, okay, we're going to back up and we're going to defend Jeremiah outside, then you've got this 235-pound bull running right at you. So I think those 2 kids stepping up this season and playing well isn't just about depth. It maximizes your potential of being able to use the 2 running backs that you have. And I think that adds a very important element to this room.
Yeah, their skill sets alone explain why they need to have the impact that they do. I mean, right now, Aeneas is probably your best pass blocker as a running back on third down. Jeremiah Love was used more as a lead blocker on runs. I'm sure there's a long list of things that Jeremiah Love can do. I'm also going to assume that pass protection is on that list. But in the spirit of what you said, exactly. Right. You don't need him to do it. We've already had discussions about what Jadarian Price is as a pass blocker, area that he has to get better at for sure. But when you have a guy like Aeneas Williams on your roster, you don't necessarily have to have 4 and 24. Their role be not having the ball in their hands. And then with Kedron Young, we've talked so much this offseason. We've gotten so many buy-sell holds and mailbags and super chats, right? Hey, who's going to replace Riley Leonard on third down? Well, they got this dude by the name of Kedron Young, and he's 5'11", 235. And I have yet to see, and I've yet to see anybody willingly want to get in his way and tackle him in the hole in all the moments that I've seen him.
Stanford tried that once.
Sure did.
Didn't go well. Didn't go well. Not for Stanford anyway.
No. And so they provide a unique skill set that really rounds out the entire room. And it truly puts Notre Dame's running back room in a conversation of not even being hyperbolic. It's how do you stop them?
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, the answer is you can't. Jeremiah Love's going to run over you or literally jump over you. Mm-hmm. Jadarian Price will make you miss in the hole. Aeneas Williams, like we've seen, can beat, a Big Ten linebacker one-on-one in space on a slow go route. And then Kedron Young will just run you over.
Mm-hmm.
Can't stop it.
He can make you miss too. And that's what, but if you're sitting there bracing for impact, he's agile enough to make you miss. But if you're sitting there trying to wait for a move, he's going to run you over. I mean, it's such a different skill set. And it makes it really fun to kind of to kind of watch him play and watch this group play, and it just gives a lot to it. And there's other sophomores. Like I think, talk about transitioning over to the receivers and Micah Gilbert. You could argue that behind the quarterback and offensive lineman, there might not be a sophomore who's more needed to step up than Micah Gilbert or Cam Williams. But I'm going to start with Micah Gilbert because I think Mike is the more natural boundary. And it's twofold, Trev. It's not just, I need you to step up right now. And it's kind of like running backs. Part of the reason that it's present, but it's also the future, because there's a better than decent chance that in 2026, you're not going to have Jeremiah Love and Jadar Price anymore. And those guys have to have shown their ability to go out and lead the offense. Same thing here. They need somebody to take some of the snaps burden off of Malachi Fields' shoulders. If Malachi Fields is everything we hope he can be this year, Mike Gilbert's still going to play a very important role for Notre Dame. 2 reasons. One, you want to give Malachi Fields a breather. And can you still be good when he's on the field? I mean, what you have to avoid, because good teams will see this, is when Malachi Fields is off the field, they're not throwing the ball to the boundary, and their run percentage is much higher. Good teams will see that beyond game 4. They'll see, and the playoff teams will definitely see that.
Yeah.
And so when you're stealing minutes, you have made yourself very the tells are there very clearly. And a guy like Micah Gilbert, if he can step up and be the player we hope he can be, Trevor, then all of a sudden Malachi's off the field and shoot, we thought we had a breather, and they banged the backside dig for a big play to Micah Gilbert. Or he had a great block on the perimeter that sprung the run game, or he had that really nasty back shoulder catch to move the chains on 3rd down. And, now we don't get any breathers when this guy's in the field. What if something happens to Malachi Fields and he goes down? You can't be in a situation, whether it's a game or multiple games. Now there's this giant drop-off in the boundary. You can't have that. You can't afford to have that. Say whatever you want about Bo Cons, but you know what Bo Cons did last year more than anything else? He answered the bell for 16 straight games. Well, Malachi Fields is a guy that he didn't miss any games last year, but he was injured at the end of the season, and he missed all but 1 game of his sophomore season. So he's not someone that has necessarily been able to answer the bell. Well, I think he's durable. I mean, the one, I think it was a knee injury, I think is what it was in 2021, or is it 22? But the point is, what if he gets hurt again? What if he goes down? It's happened to him before. Are you then just like, well, guess we're not going to be the team we hoped we could be? Micah Gilbert's not Malachi Fields in 2025, but how close can he get to him is going to determine a lot on how successful this could be. We've talked a lot about Cam Williams needing to step up. I mean, he got a lot of work this spring, made some growth, long way to go. How much growth does he make in the summer and in fall camp? Can he give you a 6'2" dynamic, fast vertical weapon? What does that do to your offense? It changes it a ton. We're sitting there trying to defend Jaden Greathouse, who's 6'1"-ish. You're trying to defend 5'10" Will Pauling and 5'10" Jordan Faison, and all of a sudden they put this 6'2", 205, 210-pound guy out there who runs a 4.4, and they're just running go routes and post routes to him. It gives you something different. And that's why those 2 receivers are very important. Plus, how well they perform this year is going to go a long way towards determining whether Notre Dame's going to go back to the portal next year for another outside receiver or 2. And so there's a present and a future aspect to these sophomores stepping up and providing depth at wide receiver.
Yeah, I have an article coming up. Actually, I think it's already out right now about just the injury history for wide receivers at Notre Dame in the last 2 seasons. They've had significant injuries at wide receiver in one way or another, whether it's the transfers that they brought in or the kids that they have on campus right now. In 23, Jaden Greathouse's end-of-the-year production would have looked a lot different if he didn't pull his hamstring. He was missing games, didn't have the same burst. Jordan Faison last year hurt his ankle on his 2nd catch of the year, and then missed a lot of time. And in the game that he came back against Louisville, he hurt it again. Got a little banged up again. Will Pauling in his injury history. Malachi Fields in 22 broke his foot in the season opener and then missed the rest of the season. He's been very healthy since, but it's not like he enters this conversation with 0 injury history. Micah Gilbert broke his hand in spring or finger, and now he is back. He posted that video online of him going through workouts. He's catching passes again. But point being, you need to round out your depth 1. And then for all the reasons that you talked about, Brian, they provide skill sets that you don't necessarily have. I mean, we talked all offseason about like Notre Dame's receiving core outside of Jaden Greathouse doesn't look, that big. Yeah, I mean, Micah Gilbert's on the field practicing with him in the spring. I think it's a whole different conversation. And then for everything that you said about Cam Williams, he has a skill set on the team that nobody else has, the size and the speed. And so they are absolutely need to, in my eyes, at the minimum, one of them. One of them has to emerge between summer workouts and fall campus. Okay, like this is the fifth guy. Like he is now an integral part of this rotation, not a, yeah, man, in a couple of years, this kid's going to be nasty. That time is now. You have to be really good this season. Next guy on the list, Bryan.
Just real quick, Trev, because we're running a little bit long on time, and I want to be able to spend some time on the defense. But let's just kind of there's three other guys on the list that we've talked a lot about, and we'll talk about more when we get to the position previews. But like talked about Jack Larson, can he make a jump? I actually thought Jack in the scrimmage, I was a little disappointed. He didn't catch a ball. He just didn't look comfortable. Last game, blue gold game that we saw, looked like that's the Jack Kaiser that Notre Dame recruited. Comes off the line well. It's pretty good coverage by Don Schuler, but then Jack just makes this crazy catch on the sideline of a very good throw from CJ Carr. But why did CJ throw that ball? Because we've talked about this before. He has supreme confidence in Jack Larson. They've been throwing together for 3 years. I remember watching them like 3-4 years ago at the Irish Invasion, right after CJ had committed, and he's thrown to Jack Carson and Cam Williams like it's not like just like they've been doing it their whole lives. He is a very important piece of the tight end depth chart. How well he performs is going to go a long way towards that. And then we talked earlier about Gerby Lambert and Styles Prescott. I hope Gerby Lambert can come back healthy and push Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp. And either A, beat one of them out, because now you have a 6'7", 330-pound monster who was so good you had to play him, or at the very least provide great depth to where if something goes down, something happens to one of those guys, either they don't play well or they get injured, Gerby is ready to go and ready to help you out. Same with Styles Prescott. He made a nice jump this spring. He's another guy that I had a 4.5-star upside grade to because he was undersized. He had a lot to learn, but you could see some athletic tools and some length and some talent. He had a nice jump this spring. Is he ready to truly jump in and help solidify that 2 deep and give them a 4-man group as opposed to just a 2 or a 3-man group? Those guys are going to be important parts of this as well. We could talk about Peter Jones inside, potentially at guard, providing some depth. I don't know that we're quite there yet with him because of Sullivan Absher's presence. And now that Jagasol's there and Christopher Tarrant comes back and guys like that. But, I mean, really the whole sophomore class just about outside of maybe 2 guys, maybe Logan Saldate and Peter Jones, have a great shot to be in the 2 deep when the season kicks off. And when I mean 2 deep, it's like, okay, I know the running backs are listed in 3rd and 4th, but they're in the 2 deep as far as like rotation, how they're going to play, things like that. So there's so much emphasis on the importance of the sophomore class. Everything from you need star power to emerge to quality role players to guys that are just going to give you good depth. But what we see, the entire depth chart of this season, I'll predict this: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line. I predict 9 guys will be listed on Notre Dame's depth chart when they release it for Miami. Now, that's not a 2 deep because at running back, they usually list like 4 guys. At tight end, they'll list 3 or 4 guys, and then they'll list a 2 deep on the offensive line positions. Quarterback, receiver, they usually list 2 deep. But because of the way that they use the running back room and they use 3-4, they do use that in the depth chart. I predict 9 guys from the sophomore class will be in the 2 deep for Notre Dame when they get ready to play Miami, the one released by Notre Dame. That says a lot about how important this class is to Notre Dame's success.
100%. I could absolutely see that happening as well. Well, all right, folks, that's going to do it for the offensive portion of the sophomore surge segment. But don't go anywhere. We are getting ready to talk about the defense. But before we get there, please be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family. But as always, the best way to support what we do here, you guys already know what it is. Subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Bryan, we are going to wrap up today by talking about the defensive class for the 2024 recruiting class. And it's a little bit different of a conversation what we had on offense. On defense, this is more of a, gosh, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. There's a lot of supporting members in this.
What's interesting about the sophomore class on defense, Trevor, is there's a difference between the potential of the class and the need of the class. Leonard Moore has to be a star. You need him to be a star. The rest of them, you just need to give you depth. You just need Bryce Young to be a good part of your defensive end rotation. You just need Kingston to be a good part of your linebacker rotation. You just hope that Sean Civillano can give you some nice minutes. You hope that Bronte Johnson can crack the two deep at that position. You hope that Carson Hobbs can do it. So there's a lot of all the need for – you don't need Bronte Johnson to emerge as a starter. If he does, great, but you don't need it. You need him to be a good depth player. You don't need Carson Hobbs to outplay Leonard Moore or Christian Gray. You need him to give you good depth to where if something happens to one of those guys, he can step in. You don't need Kingston to be a first-team All-American this year. You just need him to be a good depth play, rotation player for you, which is exactly what he was last year. But here's what makes it interesting. There's also a lot more potential star power in 2025 on defense than on offense. Where on offense, you need C.J. Carr to step in and be the guy. You need Anthony Knapp to step in and be a really good football player at left tackle. Like, those are needs. You don't have that. You need your sophomore running backs to step up. You need Micah Gilbert to really be there. But here on defense, you only have one need for a guy to be a star. However, there's multiple guys who have the talent to be stars now. The question is going to be how many of them get there. That's going to be the question, is how many of those guys become stars. But if they do, here's the reality of it, Trev. If Bryce Young and Kingston Villamasa are just pretty darn good football players from Notre Dame this year, they will be part of yet another really excellent top 5 to 10 defense this season. However, if Bryce Young and Kingston Villamasa, two top 50 players that were 5-star upside guys, start to play to their 5-star potential this year, if Bryce Young is for Notre Dame what people expect Colin Simmons to be for Texas and Dylan Stewart to be for South Carolina, all of a sudden that changes the game for Notre Dame. If Kingston Villamasa, who I had as a top 50 recruit with 5-star upside, starts to play like that 5-star upside guy this year, and all of a sudden the starting linebacker room is Drake Bone and Mike and Kingston at will, because you have to get them on the field together. Now all of a sudden we're talking about those two guys along with Leonard Moore forming what could be the best defense in college football. They're the keys to that. Now, Notre Dame doesn't need to have the number one defense in college football to compete for a championship. They just got to be top 5 to 8. But if they are the number one defense where you literally have a star sophomore on all 3 levels, Bryce Young, Kingston, Leonard Moore, now all of a sudden you are a team that is as athletic and as long and as talented as any defense in the country, and you've got a shot to become arguably the best defense in college football. That's what this group can provide. The interesting thing is they just don't need it to still be really good. That's what makes this group. And I saw like you kind of battling, like, how do I introduce this group, to talk about, because there's star power potential, but yet they don't need them to be stars this season.
That's what makes this such a fun conversation to have about this class, because here's what's crazy to say. They don't need them to be stars, but all 3 of the guys at the top of this class, Leonard Moore, Bryce Young, and Kingston, all possess a skill set and a physical tool belt that nobody else at their positions have. And that's what's weird about this group.
And for most teams,
literally,
most teams don't have guys like that.
Literally. They don't have a 6'7", 260 twitchy defensive end. They don't have a 6'3", 235-pound linebacker that can play Mike, Will, and rush the passer. And they don't have a 6'2", very long corner that might be the fastest player on the team. But to say that they don't need them, outside of Leonard Moore, to be the stars of this upcoming season is a wild thing to say.
And Bronte Johnson might be one of your 5 to 7 best athletes on the football team.
Yeah.
Carson Hobbs is probably in the top 6 or 7 in speed on the team. I'd be willing to bet that he's top 6 or 7 in just pure speed on this team. Like,
I'd second that. I'd absolutely second that. So let's get into these kids a little bit individually here. What does and we talked about him a lot in the Star Power segment, but what does this type of season look like for Leonard Moore?
Just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, that's really it. Just keep doing what you're doing. The only thing for Leonard Moore is just don't regress. If he's the same exact player he was at the end of last year, that's really good. If he just has normal freshman to sophomore year growth, that means, look, you're a little stronger at the point of attack. Your angles are a little bit better. We talked about last week the play against, Jeremiah Smith in the first drive of the game. It's 3rd and 4. You know where the ball's going. Leonard knew where the ball was going. And he played it in a way where he's thinking like a 7-on-7 tournament. I'm going to sit right here where the first down marker is and take away that throw. And what he forgot was Jeremiah Smith is like 6'3", 210 and really strong. He just kind of pushed him off of it. He used his momentum to kind of bang him, knock him off, and that's all the space that they needed for that quarterback to get the ball there. A more experienced quarterback is going to say, hey, I'm going to play on you, but I'm not going to let you body me. I'm not going to just sit here at the thing and like when Leonard dropped, he kind of stopped right at the first down marker, and Jeremiah was able to knock him off. Where now he'll kind of run with Jeremiah, wait for Jeremiah to plant, then he plants and he eats it up, and the window's gone. And that's what Benjamin Morrison did a great job of against Marvin Harrison the year before, is knowing when, like Benjamin would kind of mirror Marvin to take away any quick game, but he didn't let Marvin push him off the mark. When he came up and got physical with Marvin at the line of scrimmage, it was 3rd and long or 2nd and 10, and he knew, hey, that's going to be something more down the field. And Leonard's got to learn some things like that. Those are the minor little tweaks and improvements he can make this season. There's times I want to see him play the football a little bit better. There's some things he'll need to do better when playing zone. Squeezing down inside and cover 3 on those seam routes and post routes a little bit better than he did last year. Those are all minor improvements that you expect the guy of his talent to make from freshman to sophomore year. That's all that's needed from Leonard Moore. I don't know if there's a big jump that is even capable of how good he was last year. I mean, what's a big jump look like? He's going to look like Deion Sanders of Florida State? Like, just be a more refined player. Like Benjamin Morrison, how did he get better as a sophomore? He just cleaned up a couple things and just got stronger. I mean, there's not a lot you can do from an effectiveness standpoint. Just be a little bit more fundamentally sound and just be a little bit stronger. That is an All-American caliber player. That's 100%. What you need from Leonard Moore. That's it. Just normal freshman, sophomore growth, and you're an All-American caliber player. That's all your team needs from you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He's one of the very few players on the team where his progression won't be directly shown on the stat sheet. Because if you go back and look 11 passes defended, 2 interceptions, led the cornerback room in tackles, and didn't start the first 4 games. I mean, there's not a lot that you can draw back to say, oh, he improved. At quarterback position, you can tell. Tight end position, you could tell. Different linebacker positions, you can tell. But for Leonard Moore, it'll definitely be more on the field. That was some of the gripe with Benjamin Morrison. He had less interceptions, so then he has to be worse. It's like, no, sir. That is not the case.
But more breakups, so he actually got his hands on a higher number of passes of the targets that were thrown at him. Correct. Yeah.
Next guy on this list is Bryce Young. And now we start getting into the interesting conversation of what does that freshman year to sophomore year jump look like? There's a lot of people that have been, myself included, that have talked about and projected what that jump looks like for Bryce Young. So for you, what does it look like? Is it, more tackles for loss? Is it more sacks? Is it all of it? Is it more snaps? What does that look like for you?
I want to see Bryce be more disruptive on a consistent basis. I think that's really the key for him this season. Is he last year he was flashy. I mean, I think of the edge rush he had against Indiana in the playoff, and you're just like, dude, he's just better than the guy that he was going against. That's the only pressure he had. Although there's another play I thought he should have been credited with a pressure, but there was stretches of that game where he just was kind of just there. And that's kind of thing with Bryce Young is there's snaps where he looks like all world. I mean, he had a sack against Penn State but then there's times where just like, what are you doing here? USC game's a great example. There was 3 plays where he had a pressure. 2 times he hit the quarterback. Then there's other plays where you're like, I don't know that Bryce necessarily has a game plan for what he's trying to do here. He knows I got to get to the quarterback, but he didn't necessarily have a game plan on how to get there. I mean, look, being a great edge rusher, you've got a game plan. It's me versus you. And my job right now is I'm rushing the quarterback, and it's me versus you. Here's my game plan. I'm going to do this. If you do this, I'm countering this. If you do that, I'm doing this. And that's the chess match of being a great edge rusher. And there's times where Bryce just was like, if they got his initial move, well, I tried. He's a freshman. It's kind of, you're not surprised by it. What I want to see from him is just be more overall disruptive. And the thing is, like, he had 3, according to Pro Football Focus, he had 3 pressures in the playoff. And we can name every one of them because when he did it, they were really impressive plays. It's be more consistent is goal number 1.
Yeah.
Just do your job on a more consistent basis. There was a lot of times Bryce wasn't in the right gap. He wasn't necessarily kind of holding firm the right way. Played like a freshman. That's really what it is. He played like a freshman. Now it's okay. You want to, Penn State's running on you. You don't need your coach to tell you they've ran 3 straight outside zones right at me. I got to be firmer at the point of attack and force that sucker back inside, not let them get that stretch on me. Recognize what they're trying to do to you, and then go to your toolbox on how to stop it. Hey, they're anchoring me. They're trying to reach me. So what do I got to do? I got to work outside and stop my feet and anchor this guy, set the edge, and put him back inside to where Drake Bowen and Kingston and Jalen and Jaden Alsberg can clean it up, right? Like, that's what I'm trying to do. It's just those type of things from Bryce is what I need to see. If he does that, then he will naturally have more sacks, have more pressures on the quarterback, and be a more disruptive player. I mean, he played 208 pass rush snaps last year, only had 17 pressures. That's not great production. I'd like to see a little bit more. But of those 17 pressures, 7 of them resulted in a hit on the quarterback. And so, like, either a sack or a hit. So, like, that part of it is pretty good. And so it's really just about taking his game, to that higher level and just becoming a more disruptive player for Notre Dame this season. And if he can do that, then he's got a chance to become a very disruptive player. What I don't think that what my expectations for Bryce are not is I'm not expecting him to make like an Isaiah Foskey year 2 type of jump. And I love when you use this example, Trev, is, Isaiah Foskey's breakout didn't come until his 3rd year. And, first year he doesn't play hardly at all. He plays like 54 snaps. Comes out the next year as a true sophomore. So as a freshman, Isaiah Foskey played 54 snaps. That's it. He had 2 pressures. Comes out the next year. He has 18 pressures and 10 hits on the quarterback as a true sophomore on only 153 pass rush snaps. Just like 50 less than what Bryce did, but significantly better production and from a hit sacks on the quarterback. And then obviously the pressure numbers weren't that much better. Well, imagine if Bryce Young makes a jump like that. He's going to be a star. But what I'm saying is he doesn't even need to make that type of jump. He just needs to be kind of what Isaiah was as a second-year player, which was very disruptive. And when you look at Isaiah's numbers that year and what he did that season, according to Pro Football Focus, he had 18 total pressures on 153 snaps. And so if you put him to what Bryce's numbers were, that would have resulted in 24 pressures. That's 7 more than Bryce. He had 10 hits on the sacks plus hits on the quarterback on 153 pressures. If you put that up towards what Bryce did snaps wise last year, that's 14 sacks plus hits on the quarterback, which is double what Bryce did this year. That's it. Same number of snaps. That's double the production. But he wasn't a star. He wasn't a 10-11 sack guy. I think Bryce can have more than 4.5 sacks this year because I expect him to play a lot more than Isaiah did in year 2. But what I'm not saying is required is for him to be what a lot of people I think he's going to be, which is like this 10+ sack guy. I think he's capable of that? Of course. But I'm still grow to that. I'm still junior year he's going to be that guy. He's still a pretty raw guy. So, but for me, it's like if he taps into that potential, great. That's amazing. He could be a star, but it's not what I demand of him, or the defense can't be good. Whereas if Anthony Knapp is kind of just an okay player, they're just a good, solid rotation guy, then you're struggling at left tackle. You need him to be that. You don't need Bryce to be that. If he does it, great. Great. What the need is, I need you and Josh Burnham to be a better version at defensive end than what we saw last year at defensive end. As a duo, if you become a star, that's great, but it's just not it's not required to where if he doesn't do it, I'm disappointed. I think he's a growing year to where he makes a jump. And then now going into 2026, a lot of national people are talking about keep your eye on Bryce Young this year, because I think he's going to be a breakout star. Even though he showed flashes of it last year, he was this, he was that. Now we think he's ready to be a star. That's what I want to see from Bryce Young. That's the minimum one I would see. That'll make me happy about his development in year 2.
100%. And we've been talking about it all offseason. Is he somebody that has the potential to be a breakout star, but it's not a necessity? And that's a really good spot to be in when you're talking about a talent like Bryce Young. There's not that additional pressure of, all right, 19-year-old Bryce Young, you now have to go out and be one of the best players that we have on defense. If it comes organically and the light bulb just goes on for him, and then the genetics start kicking in, and then that grown man strength starts kicking in, and he starts playing like a 6'7", 260-pound guy consistently, that's when this defense gets really, really nasty. Next guy is Kingston Viliamasa, and he's somebody that gets a lot of attention as well in the linebacker room. Linebacker, it's kind of the same thing as the defensive line. Look, a breakout season from Kingston helps this team get closer and closer to its ceiling in 2025, which is a really good spot to be in. But based on having Drake Bowen and Jaden Osbury and Jalen Sneed and a handful of other players, Preston Zinner, to name a couple, it's not a necessity for Kingston. I will say, because of his skill set, I look at him in a slightly different light than Bryce Young, because Kingston can help you at multiple spots across the defense in different ways. So how do you evaluate a player like Kingston?
He's also more advanced fundamentally and schematically than what Bryce is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But that's the bigger thing for me, Trev, when I look at this, the difference between Kingston and Bryce is they don't need Kingston to become that kind of player, but part of me has a little bit more expectation that he will than what we see from Bryce, because he's further ahead from a instincts, feel for the game, that type of thing. He's just further ahead than what Bryce is. And so I don't expect him to become like a star necessarily this year, but I think he's going to be pretty good. And if I had to pick, okay, you can only pick one. You can pick a breakout season from either Bryce or Kingston. One of them becomes okay, you're going into 2026 like nobody has a better linebacker room than Notre Dame, based on what we saw. Or going into the postseason saying nobody has a better 1-2 punch at linebacker than Notre Dame. Yeah, Texas got Anthony Hill, but their number 2 guy, he ain't like Kingston. Okay, Drake's can play with Anthony Hill, but that dude from Texas can't play with Kingston. Like I'd pick that. I think that's more likely because of how advanced he is. And the other thing, too, that makes it dangerous is you don't need Kingston to play 95% of the snaps. You can keep him fresher in the fourth quarter. So of the two, he's most likely to break out. But again, you don't need Kingston to be anything different than what he was a year ago from a reps, how often he was used standpoint. What you need him to be in year 2 is limit the mistakes. He made a lot of freshman mistakes last year. You think of the seam route that where he kind of doesn't carry the seam and he bumps into Benjamin Morrison and on that long pass in Northern Illinois. You think of the Louisville game where they ran read zone away from him. He bites hard and that lets Tyler Shuck just run free up the seam. I mean, we all remember the play Leonard Moore made, but why was Tyler Shuck that open on a read zone? Well, Kingston didn't read it. He overplayed it. And he lets it get outside. There was other times where it's like, okay, you didn't really have that feel for what was going on there. But then there's other times you're like, dude, that guy read that play like he was a senior. It's limit those big mistakes. Like you could see the specialness with Kingston last year as an off-ball linebacker and as a pass rusher. It's just like a normal freshman to sophomore, limit the big mistakes. And that's all part of learning a defense. And that's why I have a feeling that Kingston has a shot to make a bigger jump than maybe normal, is because of the fact that a lot of stuff we saw last year was like, mistakes that Drake was making early in the season as well. But Drake was a year 2 guy, where now Kingston's going into year 2 with a whole year under his belt, where Drake didn't play a whole lot as a freshman. So Kingston got to work that stuff out as a freshman, where Drake had to work that stuff out as a sophomore. By the end of the year, Drake was very good. Well, Kingston was able to work that stuff out too, and he was pretty decent in the postseason as well. And then we saw him just all over the field in the blue gold game. I mean, he was all over the field. So I actually have, if we were doing breakouts, if we were including sophomores in the breakout category we did last week, I would have had Kingston in that conversation. If we were allowed to use sophomores, I would have had Kingston in that conversation. I have a feeling that Kingston, at some point in time in 2025, whether it's game 1 or game 9 or 10, at some point in time, they're just going to be like, he's too good not to start. We have to start him. We have to have more snaps of him and Drake on the field together. I think that's one of my predictions for this season, is that he becomes that kind of player where it's like 34 and 27 got to be on the field more together. They have to.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think that's when his very versatile skill set comes into play as well. His ability to rush the passer. I know there's been some questions around what Chris Ash is going to do, because Al Golden liked to rush Snead and then eventually Kingston off the edge a lot. That's another piece to this Viliamasa puzzle that we have going on. Where does he fit in with this defense? And him elevating makes him more of an impact. Absolutely.
What are your thoughts? I mean, I just gave mine. What are your thoughts on what kind of player that Kingston can be this year? Not thoughts of what he can be. You just said what he can be. What are your expectations? Like what are you saying? Hey, if I had to make a prediction, I think Kingston's going to be this. And Bryce, because you let me do a lot of the talking, which I appreciate. But I want to hear what do you think? What are your expectations for this is what I think they're going to do this season? We know what they're capable of, but what do you think they're going to do? If you had to put like prediction on it, what would it be for those two guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Bryce needs to be more than the super exciting true freshman. He needs to be more of an effective part of the rotation, because as quickly as a very exciting true freshman like Bryce Young at 6'7", 265 can come onto the scene, you can also, into your sophomore year, if you don't take that jump, kind of fall to the wayside a little bit. When it's like, okay, the novelty of you just being gigantic is kind of worn off on me. I need that to start turning into consistent production. But the reason why I say that about a kid like Bryce is it doesn't – I'm not afraid that won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very confident that he's going to take that next step. So what does that look like for him? He's a consistent pass rusher. Not crazy flat. He's not doing what Stephon Tuitt did in 2012 and 2013. He's not doing what Isaiah Foskey did in 21 and 22. But it is more along the lines of what Foskey did in 20.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He's just he's always around the football. Numbers might not always translate it as such, but like I'm talking total number of sacks. Pressures will go up. That's what I expect from Bryce.
If I had to put a number on it, I would say regular season, my expectation for Bryce is about 8 tackles for loss and 5 sacks.
Yeah.
That's my expectation for the regular season.
Yep.
Maybe 7.5, 7, but somewhere around there.
Yep.
My expectation for Kingston is I think he's going to be a guy that's going to, like I said, I just think that we're going to see more of of those two. And look, we pointed to last year. I felt at times some of the best linebacker play we got from Notre Dame last year as a tandem was when Drake and Kingston were on the field together.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt about it. And I think Kingston's going to be a guy that you're going to look at and be a 60 tackle guy, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, a couple picks. Like, I just think he's going to be a very disruptive player. Those numbers would look better on most defenses because, again, he's going to be splitting reps with Jaden Osbury and Jalen Steed. Jaden Osbury last year had 58 tackles and 6.5 tackles for loss. He's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be that 4-man group, and then Kingston will have some snaps at Mike and to spell Drake as well. But I think about 60 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks is about what I think from Kingston this season. That's my prediction for those two.
When I look at a player like Kingston, I think by the end of the season, we're going to be talking about him more in the Leonard Moore light than we are in the Bryce Young light of, hey, you just have to be an effective part of the rotation. At the end of the season, come postseason, it would not surprise me at all if we're sitting on Thursday shows when we're talking about keys to victory. There will be some games just like, Kingston kind of has to go be that dude at that level of defense because he, like I've said, provides a skill set where he can impact you at all 3 levels. He's the only linebacker last season that recorded an interception. I would say he's a more natural pass rusher off the edge than what Jalen Sneed is. Jalen Sneed is just very freaky athletic.
Yeah.
But Kingston, from a fundamental standpoint, is a better pass rusher than what Jalen Sneed is.
He bends better. He has a better feel for winning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this, Trevor. I do think when Notre Dame gets to the postseason that they're going to need Boubacar, Bryce, and Kingston to be really good on third down.
Yes.
To win a title.
Absolutely.
They will need
absolutely. That. Which goes into my point. Once the season progresses and we're getting into week 11, week 12, and then into the postseason, Kingston will be talked about in that light of you need your dudes to be dudes. He's going to be one of them.
Let's stay in the front 7 here real quick because I think the sophomore class also is going to be very key to the depth of the defensive line, and how deep this defensive line is going to be determined a lot by the sophomore class. Another player that I think has the potential to really impact this team on third down is Logan Thomas. Now, the questions about Logan Thomas are twofold. Can he get bigger and stronger? Can he stay healthy? That's going to be my questions about Logan Thomas from now until the time his Notre Dame career is over with. There's no question about that. If he answers those questions positively, he could be that third down pass rushing weapon. Where it's like, look, just because the kid's got legitimate like high 4.5 type of speed. Legitimate. Now, if he gets up to 240, can he keep that speed? I actually think he can get more explosive. He's one of those guys that goes from 215 to 240, and that lower body strength that he adds and that lower body power makes him even twitchier than he is now. And he's a pretty strong kid for his size. He just has to fill out. I think he can have that role. I think a guy like Cole Mullins, I've looked at this season and said, boy, you better hope Josh Burnham and Bryce Young are as good as advertised, because I don't know what your answer is after that, except maybe like a true freshman like Chris Burgess. With what we saw from Cole Mullins, another sophomore this spring, I'm like, dude, I feel like, honestly, you might even be able to give him some snaps in part of the rotation. Give him like 10, 15 snaps against maybe some of the – I don't know if you do that against like A&M, but you do that against Purdue and you do that against some of the other teams in the schedule, where he showed me something, especially teams that want to run the football. Like teams that want to run the football, there may be some games where maybe Josh Burnham's playing a little bit of Viper, and you're going Bryce and Cole in some of those base down moments against teams that want to line up and run the football. So I think he's a player. And then Sean Sevillano is, can he force his way into the rotation? Right now, you're not just going to slide your way into the D-tackle rotation because of all the veterans. You've got fifth-year seniors in Gabriel Rubio and Jason Onye, fifth-year senior in the transfer portal, and Jared Dawson. You've got a junior in Armel Mukum, redshirt sophomore. You've got a true junior in Elijah Hughes. Like, you're going to have to force your way into that rotation. That's a deep rotation. Sean Sevillano's a guy that I think the staff would like to force his way in. They would like for him to force them to play him. He's 6'1", he's 330, 340, depending on the time of the year. He's between 320 to 340. I think they would really like for either him or Davion Dixon to force their way into the field, where they just have that big 10 snaps a game, short yardage, goal line, monster up the middle that makes it really hard to run at. And so Sean Sevillano's a guy that he's not going to play unless he forces them to play him. But if he forces them to play them, gives them a legitimate weapon that they don't really have right now, which is just a big, beefy, you're not moving me off the ball kind of guy. That's what he's going to show. So I think those three young sophomores, how many of them force their way into the two deep or let's use the word rotation, is I think, more appropriate for the D-line, because I would argue that at least 3 of the 4 spots, they're going to go 3 deep. I completely forgot to mention Donovan Heinisch as part of that group as well. Like, that's how deep they are. I'm listing like 5 guys. I'm like, I feel like I'm missing somebody, but I can't think of it. Oh, Donovan Heinisch, who was your best pass rusher up the middle last year of anyone not named Riley Mills. So those 3 guys could provide some really stabilizing depth, some beef. I think Cole Mullins provides some beef at D end. Sevillano provides some beef at nose. And then, of course, your most explosive athlete on your defensive front is probably Logan Thomas. Him and Boubacar are probably in that conversation for just a twitchy, some explosive first step at defensive end. What can they provide? And then on the second level, Troy, I'll let you comment on that first, and then I'll kind of get to the second level before we wrap up with the secondary.
Yeah, I'll say this about Logan Thomas. His emergence, I think, will also pay really big dividends to Kingston, tying this back to KVA, about if Logan Thomas can emerge as that third down pass rusher. I think that puts Kingston in a prime spot to replace what Jack Kaiser was at linebacker on third down situations, because they won't be as enticed. Like, okay, well, now we got to move Kingston down. Okay, so are you going to run with one linebacker? Because like Jalen Sneed in coverage, I don't know what that's going to look like. Jaden Osbury in coverage, you didn't ask him to do a whole lot of that last season. So where does that leave you? Do you put in a third safety? What does that do to your defense? So I think the domino effect of Logan Thomas emerging as a go-to edge rusher on third down will allow Kingston to either A, blitz from the linebacker spot like we saw Jack Kaiser do against Virginia, against USC, several teams down the stretch, or will it let you go out and cover? Because Jack Kaiser also should have had an interception against Penn State in the Orange Bowl. Kingston could also play that type of role for you because of how versatile he is. So that emergence from Logan Thomas, I think, will be huge for this defense this fall as well.
Second level, I don't see Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak cracking the 2 deep unless there's an injury.
Yeah.
However, I think those 2 guys are going to be players that Marty Biagi loves coaching up this year. I'll be honest, I'm going to be very surprised if Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak aren't starting on the coverage teams this year. I will.
Agreed.
And maybe on the return team. With all due respect to the big receivers they like to put up in the front line, I don't know that Notre Dame has a lot of those this year, but even more so, I'd rather Teddy Rizak do that because he runs like some of the receivers that they've used there in the past. Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas's. He can run. He's 6'3 plus. He's going to be over 220 this year. I would love to see Teddy Rizak and Bodie Cahoon just be monsters on special teams this year. So it's going to be really hard for them to crack the rotation at linebacker, not because they're not talented, just because the guys above them are so good. And then you've got Madden Faramo in the freshman class. But I fully expect them to be major special teams weapons this year. And that also ties into whether or not Carson Hobbs and Bronte Johnson crack those starting lineups in the secondary or anything other than like rotational players. I think all 4 of them are obviously going to be guys that are going to be major weapons on special teams for Marty Biagi as coverage guys. And that doesn't get talked a lot about. It's not sexy. It's not like a hot topic. Like, hey, if we did a special team show, our numbers would be half what we did if we were if we did a previewing the offense on Monday, previewing the defense on Tuesday, previewing special teams on Wednesday. The Wednesday show would get way fewer live viewers and way fewer overall viewers. And the people that don't watch, the ones that cry the most about special teams more often than not. But the point is, it's not a sexy position. And I understand it. There's a lot less snaps of special teams and especially like leverage snaps than there is on offense or defense. I get it. But it's still very important. And I think those 2 guys are going to be very, very impact players on special teams. Absolutely do. Let's talk more about the skill player guys, because Carson Hobbs is not going to start for Notre Dame this year, barring injury, most likely. But he steps into that role that Leonard Moore had last year, where you're going to play in the rotation as long as you keep developing, and you're an injury away from stepping in. His breakout this spring, Trevor, was huge for Notre Dame because we saw him play all 3 corner positions at different times. His emergence was important. He's got to take another step, though, this spring or this summer and fall. He's going to play a very important part as, again, not as maybe as a starter, but as a very important piece of the rotation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've talked about him a lot this offseason. Carson Hobbs was one of my biggest risers over spring because cornerback depth was a big question. And then not far behind him, talking about big risers in the spring, was Tay Johnson. In the Jersey scrimmage, we got to see a facet of Tay Johnson's game that we just kind of, it was a lot of assumption. It's like, odds are he probably can because he's a freak athlete, but him coming down to make plays around the line of scrimmage was something that it was like, oh, okay, so he can play both types of safety games. We know what he is in coverage. He was good enough and athletic enough in coverage that the coaching staff decided, hey, we need more depth at corner. If Leonard Moore goes down, we're just going to put in Bronte Johnson, who was taking reps at safety for the first 15 weeks of the season. That's how athletic and how good he was projected to be in coverage. The big question that we had, hey, what's it going to look like when you have to come down and run support? What's it going to look like when you have to come down and make plays around the line of scrimmage? To a degree, he answered that in the Jersey scrimmage, and I walked away very impressed with Bronte Johnson. Carson Hobbs was somebody that he came into the season, a lot of projection. He's 6'1", he's long, he's fast, he's physical. Can he put that all together and be basically the number 2 corner at either position at field or boundary? Not only did he answer that question for me, he is now a viable option at nickel as well. Because like we're talking about with some of these other players on the team, you can't ask Devontae Smith to go and play 900 snaps this upcoming season. Not at nickel. Still some questions around how they're going to be used because we don't know what that's going to look like. But you can't ask Devontae Smith to take 100% of the snaps for 15, 16 games at nickel. You need somebody else to step up. And before Carson Hobbs' emergence, it was, well, Dallas Golden, a true freshman who has yet to put on the blue and gold, has talked about how he would like to play nickel. Odds are he can translate, but we got to see it. At least I do. I'm confident that he can do it. Have to see it happen. And your other option's Ben Minnick, who was playing safety all last season. And he moved down at the start of spring and started taking reps with Devontae Smith. Carson Hobbs came in, and it was more of a natural transition for him, and he gives you size and length at nickel. So those two guys for me, although they're probably not going to crack the starting lineup barring any sort of injury, they're going to play some meaningful minutes for Notre Dame this fall. Absolutely.
My hope is that by the time we get to fall camp, we're not talking about Carson Hobbs playing nickel. I want him being able to focus on the outside. Yeah. You had to do that in the spring because you didn't have a lot of other options. My hope is that Dallas Golden can come in or Mark Zachary can come in and kind of say, hey, I'm the number 2 here.
Sure.
To let Carson focus on the outside because there are still a lot of technical things he's got to improve upon. He's still getting by on just being long and fast and kind of strong. He's a pretty powerful kid. He doesn't look like, if you ever met Carson in person, he doesn't look real big out of pads. A little narrow shouldered, a little bit narrow hipped. But you watch him on the field, he is strong. Like he's a strong football player. And so I want to see him focus on playing outside so he can clean up some of the technical things.
Yeah.
To where he can be. And now I'm okay cross-training him at field and boundary.
Sure.
I just don't want him playing all 3. He had to in the spring. But I want to – and I think they were trying to see how does he look there, and if he maybe looked supernatural there, you could maybe play him there, and then maybe Dallas and Mark and Krieger outside. I want to see him get the opportunity to play outside and learn outside. I think there's some tools there to work with. And if he can like harness some of that stuff, then I'll feel a little bit better about him stepping in as a starter if the need is there.
Yeah.
But you look at the jump he made from his freshman year to the spring, and then if he can make another jump from the spring to the fall, then I'm going to feel a lot better about Carson Hobbs being able to step in and really – and it's not just about, okay, he's starting now. That's not the goal, is not to start if there's an injury. It's can you step in and do what Leonard Moore did last year, which is I had to replace a stud in Benjamin Morrison. I got to play to that level. And, Christian Gray did that as a freshman in 2023 when Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison went down against Pitt. He had to step in and say, okay, I'm expected now to play at a high level. And he stepped in and played at a high level.
Yeah.
And he did that also in the bowl game against Oregon State. when Cam Hart wasn't playing. So you're going to need that from him as well. It's not just about, okay, is he next in line, but if his number is called, can he play at that level? And if he can improve all of those things, then I think he's going to be a pretty good player and a guy that could help you and give you that depth to where because like Sean and I talked about this yesterday, injuries can't be an excuse anymore. You've got enough depth. Well, you don't use injuries as an excuse if you have a guy, if Carson can kind of take his game to a certain level, and then when a guy goes down, he steps into it. There you go. So that's what you need to see from him. Now, on the back end, Bronte Johnson is the guy that actually has an opportunity to go out there this spring and compete for a starting job.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He is right in the mix of that safety conversation of who steps into the starting lineup alongside of Don Schuler. And I think with how exciting Jadon Blair was this spring, and obviously his physical specs are off the chart. And, you have Luke Talich, who is kind of the veteran in the room. And then you start talking about Jalen Stroman, who transferred over from Virginia Tech. I think some people may forget sometimes about Bronte Johnson, but we're talking about a 6'2", freaky athletic, very rangy kid that is very much in the spring. At the beginning of spring, he went from a man, it'd be cool if he broke out. Can he crack his way into the rotation? To now, he is a player for me that is he has solidified his spot in the rotation to me somewhere. Now it's a question of, okay, what does it look like? Can you be a starter on this team? And that's what's interesting. Last thing I'll say on Carson Hobbs, man, one of his most impressive plays of the spring wasn't even in coverage. He was one of the very few players that was able to bring down Kedron Young in the open field in the blue gold game. CJ Carr threw a little dump off pass to him, and he made a very impressive open field tackle on Kedron Young. Very impressive.
Which was the biggest concern I had about Bronte coming out of high school. Can he stay healthy? And he's another kind of narrow-shouldered guy that wasn't a real big guy coming out of high school. Is he going to be willing to stick his nose in there? And he did that. And there was are you referring to the blue gold game?
Mm-hmm.
Remember the hit he had in the Jersey scrimmage? Because Jadon Blair had one, but and I can't remember who the back was. I don't remember who the back was. But the point is, he comes down, they force the run outside, and then Bronte fills it and just cracks the guy like 2 yards down the field. Yeah. So that wasn't the only time we saw Bronte Johnson kind of come in there and like really play at a high level. Mm-hmm. And like in the run game. Well, I knew he could cover. I knew he's rangy. Is he going to be able to give you anything in the run game? So that was a great sign from him, was being able to see him to come down and do that for them. Love that. And now he's in a position where, look, a big fall camp, he could start at safety. I don't think that I count that. I don't expect that. I think it's more about, can you come in and push yourself into the rotation, force yourself into the rotation where you're a guy that says, hey, we got to play that kid, whether it's part of a 3-man rotation or a 4-man rotation, or maybe even 5 in certain situations. And he's also played some corner. He's played some nickel. So he's really played all over it at different times. Yeah. He's played 4 different positions in the Notre Dame defense so far. He played boundary corner last year, late in the season. He's played some nickel last season in this spring. And then he's played both safety spots at different times. So he's a guy, Trevor, that gives you a 6'2 plus, long, athletic. He's one of your probably 6 to 7 best just pure athletes on the team. Got former top 100 player that just adds another potential impact player to your depth chart, whether it's 15 snaps a game or maybe even as a starter. I don't know that Bronte has the chance to become a star in year 2. I think that's a ways down the road if it happens. I don't know that I think he's got the experience playing defense in a structured system to be in a Don Schuler type of year 2 breakout player.
Sure.
But as far as a jump in the rotation, make your presence felt, have some difference-making plays, I think that's certainly reasonable to expect from him this year.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, any final thoughts, Bryan, on the sophomore class as a whole? Any final thoughts on defense before we kind of put a bow on this whole thing?
It's kind of like, man, we just spent a lot of time talking about sophomores, and it's like I felt like we had to rush through some guys because there's so many of them. And it just speaks to what we talked about, Trevor, whereas this sophomore class not only has a chance to step up and play, they need to. Absolutely need to.
Yeah.
And this team can't reach its full potential without at least a chunk of this class reaching its full potential.
Yeah.
That's the key. That's that's what the expectations are. You don't need everybody to play to their full potential. You don't need everybody to step up and be a star. You don't need everybody to play like the best version of their sophomore selves. You don't need anyone to overachieve. Like literally not one person was, I don't know if this guy's capable of that, but you kind of need him to be that. When I talk about what the expectations are for Anthony Knapp, it's not saying that Anthony Knapp's not really a guy that's capable of playing this way, but Joe Rudolph loves him, so you need to play him. And no, I think he's capable of that if he's comfortable in space. We don't know the answer to that, but he's got athleticism. People say, I had somebody say he just doesn't have the lateral quickness to play left tackle. No, you don't know the difference between he doesn't have the footwork to win on that rep and he doesn't have the lateral quickness to win on the rep. There's a difference.
Yep.
I could show you some clips from the Texas A&M game where he's has more than enough lateral quickness to get out and block the number 17 overall draft pick in the NFL draft, or the other guy. Where'd Scorton go? Second round? See a second round pick, second or third round pick. Lateral quickness isn't a problem. You're going to look slow when you don't know what you're doing or you're not comfortable with what you're doing. It's like I've said, it's the driving somewhere at night that you've never been before. You're going to drive a whole lot different than when you're driving at night to somewhere you've been 50 times. You're going to look a whole lot more comfortable in that. Your car's going to move at a much different speed unless you want to die.
Sure.
So that's the question, is nobody has to play above their potential. Nobody has to be better than we hope that they were. It's just be like yourself. And then there's a couple guys that if they can play beyond that, you've got a chance to be really special. And this team can be really special. But at the end of the day, we are also asking a lot of guys that are young to step up and be that. What percentage, and not everybody we've talked about today is going to fulfill their potential. Some guys aren't going to play a lot. Some guys aren't going to step up and do this. But the higher percentage of them that do, the better this football team is going to be, and the greater chance this team has at making a much deeper run.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for our show today. Do not forget that IB Nation Sports Talk will be live tonight at 5 p.m. You can find all that on the Irish Breakdown channel. Best way to stay in the loop is make sure you have the notification bell hit. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Bryan and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for Buy, Sell, Hold. Salty, our guy, already has the thread up on the message boards. You see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen. So make sure that you guys get your submissions in. But before you head out of here today, please be sure to hit that like button, whatever streaming platform you listen to this on. We'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. We've said it all throughout the show, but look, guys, the best way to stay informed and stay in the now, you see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen. Subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All the conversations that we're having today, all the conversations that are going on in the chat occur on a daily basis in the Champions Lounge at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that's Bryan. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.